Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of By the Numbers. The hits keep coming. I'm your host Richard Lewis. That's Duncan Thorin Shields.
Is that the new catchphrase? Is it? Is that like
what,
the
hits
fucking
just keep coming?
One of those
I
like
don't know.
60s DJs, and the
I was
hits
gonna say,
just keep on coming.
I'm pretty sure Jimmy Savile has said that at some point.
Sometimes on air. Timestamp that. Immediately start the episode with the time. Right, start over. Welcome to By the Numbers. By the way, I'm just going to go ahead and say, because even I've learned now, Rich, is it possible you could mention rivalry.gg at the beginning? I'm not even sponsored by him, but I just feel like you might need to.
Yeah, I probably should really. You're right. What I should start doing with the plugs is I should start mentioning them before we mention some unrepentant necrophile.
Again, Richard, I can imagine the memos coming through your email about the plugs. Be a bit like that time at MLG, that Adam Apicella came in like, I don't want to say where the line is, but let's just make that.
It's quite good because, like, I do, you know me, I do like to lift the veil, right? And Sam can definitely attest to this. When we sort of discuss plugs, like we've got another promotion coming up on the 22nd, something else we're gonna do. They even say, "Oh, we want to put it in your natural language." So we discuss like how we're gonna frame it, so it doesn't come across disingenuous.
I never remember the necrophiles angle of the plug.
I know.
I don't remember that part.
No, they didn't. You're right. They've never said, necrophiles.
No, Richard just goes, could I mention, formerly beloved DJs of British culture? They go, sounds fine to me. Yeah. So associate our brand with all good things and that. Yeah.
But they go over like specific wording. So it's like, they do like it if, I can be a little bit sort of edgy with the plugs. It's actually part of the agreement.
Oh, right, fair enough.
So
by the way,
it's kind of like how when we used to do the old version of By the Numbers. And
sure,
yeah,
that call does remind me. By the way, I'll tell everyone just a little fun story. Because obviously, I don't work with them now anyway.
Yeah,
but one of the most surreal moments in my life in esports was when I was sat taking a Skype call from literally, I won't even say who the executive is because whatever, I'll keep it private. A high up executive, a big American television channel who was asking me politely if I could just, while I worked really, not use the word cunt. And then I just go, all right, don't see why not. Seems fine. And then I even tried, to be honest, this is my attempt to make this sound like a reasonable conversation. I go, guess there are other words I could use. And then he goes, and then I go, anyway, is that all? And he goes, and there's a lot of motherfuckers sprinkled liberally in there as well. And I go, see what I can do. And I was just sat there just going, what even is this fucking life? And like, what is this?
I've told you the American the American hatred for the word cunt is one of those things that I'm not giving them that. I'll assimilate into American life in a lot of ways. You're not taking cunt away from British people. There's no fucking way.
It's too ingrained.
I told you the other day there was some. I was talking to some broad and she fucking said, like we're saying, and this cunt said this, and she go, I fucking hate the word cunt, me. And I'm like, I don't give a fuck. Like that is like the least thing likely to ever make me check. Like, so what?
Didn't realize.
I don't like it when you use aluminum. You fucking moron. But I got to deal with it. It's unacceptable. But it's not even a real word, is it? But we just pretend. I don't like it when you say I could care less, meaning the inverse of what it means, because you're an idiot. But you do it. We all have to just get along and live with it. Fucking cretins. Anyway, so rivalry.com, right?
Oh yeah, it's .com now. Yeah, I forgot.
Yeah, it's all right. It's okay. I'll let you off. They let me say cunt and everything, and they'll let you say cunt as your bets go wrong, which they might do unless you're an expert. Only one way to prove it: sign up. You can use referral code RLS. You get $350 worth of VIP bonuses. There you go. That's a good plug. That was pretty sensible.
Not bad.
Should we talk about
didn't even go the old
for Sao Paulo, remember?
Oh yeah, the Thunderdome thingamajig, whatever that is.
Oh yeah, and of course Thunderdome. Yeah, you might have seen this. We did it during the No Majors Club for those that watched. And basically, it's where you do pick'ems, like predictions kind of things, and if you get them all right, you win $1,000. Well, Thunderdome is back, and I think you can use !Thunderdome to find out more about it. But basically, it's going to be back for the Blast Sao Paulo. Same thing, predict match winners. You win money, you get $1,000. It's free to enter. And there you go. It's not gambling. So you can jump in and do that and get $1,000 for free.
Well, that one technically would be a skill-based game, right?
Exactly. So
and all the terminology now.
Important distinction, right? Important distinction.
Sadly, it is. I mean, here's the thing, Richard. What I love, right, is in the modern day, I actually love when people try to own you, but in owning you, they reveal like their own complete like lack of moral just hygiene on some levels. Like one of my all-time favorites was when I pointed out that HLTV.org had literally false advertising that said "get rich fast," to which Nomad, owner of the website, explained to me that I did the same thing when I promoted Alpha Draft and other sponsors, even though I explicitly only ever said, like you did there, if you're really good, you can win. Otherwise, you can just play for fun. I made all these, I made very clear distinctions. He couldn't see any sort of difference there. He imagined that was just a blurred line. I mean, the best part about his was there wasn't even sort of any like layering to that. It literally said "get rich fast." Like it was the definition of a get rich quick screen. Like that was my favorite part about it. It's like there wasn't even any attempt. Well, I mean, to be fair, Richard, if you know the user base of their website, they didn't want to sort of mess around with that terminology. They wanted it for anyone in really broken English to still get through.
Of course, yeah. So anyway, that was another episode of Weird Petty Grievances from the world of esports, starring Richard Lewis and Duncan Thorne-Shields.
Shorter segment than usual, wasn't it?
Yeah. I think we'll crack on with the show that talks about Counter-Strike now. Tell you what though, Sam, are you there, mate?
Yep.
Can you refill my cup with coffee? So I don't have to get up. Right, well,
you fucking piles as well, Mitch. You can have a shit.
That weird thing to move to from.
Well, the coffee does make people need to shit after. So you found there was a theme there. There was a link.
Cheers, bud. Appreciate it. Just black. Right. Anyway, let's talk about WESG, shall we?
Why not?
What a fucking nightmare! We did it again. So
Mate, did you see that when they released the stats, apparently their like record was 92,000 viewers concurrent.
Oh yeah. But let's
excuse me.
We can get into that if you want. I was just going to talk about the absolute ridiculousness. Where we left it, it was the semi-finals.
And we did the classic thing of like, probably fnatic or G2 winning this.
Yeah, exactly.
Little did we know, Richard.
It was fnatic versus AGO and G2 versus Windigo. AGO, the Polish team, and obviously AGO, Windigo, the Bulgarian team, and AGO, the Polish team. So we were like, well, one of these two teams that do nothing regularly in the European season, did nothing at the major, they're going to take home another big fat paycheck, which of course is the only reason they attend this god-awful event. But what happened was both G2 and fnatic lost, setting up an AGO Windigo final. Fans across World Counter-Strike were so excited at the prospect, and of course Windigo won the whole thing. So this is the start of a segment banging on teams that are already dead, starring Richard Lewis and Duncan Thorne-Shields. Let's talk about fnatic. This actually comes off the back of I think this is the worst fnatic I've seen in a while. And let's be clear what happened when they lost, because they didn't just lose like, oh, it was a close series, a couple of things went against them. No, in this series they got 16-0'd by AGO.
I saw Peter actually tweeted that was the first
ever 16-0 in the history. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, at least in CSGO, they actually did get also 16-0 once in 1.6, I remember. But No, that is no. Obviously, like think about the context of that. That's the other thing. Like, what a story franchise. Like, never been bad, never legit been bad before. Fucking hell, that's outrageous, isn't it?
No. I mean, let's put it in a broader.
That's
context.
like Man United getting beaten fucking 7-0 at Old Trafford or something. It's like at that point in time, all the old legends like, thanks for fucking that up.
What makes it crazier is that it was on Inferno, which, you know, when you think about it, like. You would expect fnatic to sort of be vaguely competitive. It wasn't some weird pocket pick. It wasn't like a CT side nuke that they ran into.
It's pretty hard to get 16-0 on that map as well. That's the thing, like you say.
But it was the first map in the series. So it shows a sort of complete lack of readiness and lack of preparation as they go into it. You know, Crims still remains the best player in this roster, but this fnatic, I think they also got battered by Mouse Sports upon their return in ECS. Like, this is just hands down like the worst I think I've ever seen fnatic. I'm trying to think of a worst incarnation of fnatic. I can't do it. I really it's beyond anything that we've seen. And of course, there's a couple of commonalities. I mean, we've been pretty generous towards some of these players, but I think it's now time to lay it bare. But still, since this is going to be a greatest hit show, let's talk about this Exist era. Since they brought him in as an IGL, remember, this is the guy that replaced Golden, and Golden won 2 tournaments back-to-back, and they had a pretty acceptable run at E-League. And they got rid of Golden. They decided Golden wasn't what they wanted, that it wasn't going to work out, so they brought in Exist, this supposed tenured and highly successful in-game leader. Since then, they just haven't done anything. They've looked absolutely terrible, and they get worse with each progressive tournament to a point where you're getting 16-0'd by a team who, if I remember rightly, you know, I'm trying to think where AGO finished. Like weren't they last in the Mountain Dew League?
I'm not sure. I don't follow that shit.
I'm pretty sure they were like last place in MDL. I mean, it is
worth pointing out they're one of the teams that obviously had some of their players stripped to go to the Virtus Pro lineup. So it's not even like it's the AGO that you might remember from like last year was half decent early on, you know. So that ain't even this lineup.
Yeah, it's absolutely absurd how bad it is to sort of lose. And like, I'll get into fans retconning the past once again, like Captain Marvel. You know, they're just like, oh no, this is how it all really happened. No, but like, what about Thanos? No, Captain Marvel was there the whole time. She was really the first Avenger, not Captain America. That's how it works now. Like, there's people pretending AGO and Windigo are good teams. like that, it's acceptable.
Here's the difference,
G2 and fnatic to lose to them.
AGO, I'm with you. Like I said, the best talent really got stripped out of that team. They have a couple of known players, like, you know, Grubby and Furlan. We've seen them forever. They're still probably around the same level they always were, you know. Like, I'm sure the team's within the top 30. I doubt the team's ever going to enter the top 10, and they'll just waver between the 2 positions there, depending on what other talent they find. The difference is, the Windigo team, I could at least give a nod to. Like, we know some of those guys, if you remember, they did legitimately get the setback where they were actually a team on the rise back in 2015. And then famously, Dreamer got his VAC ban. Unfortunately, he was one of the better players in the team. That held them back because for whatever reason, you know, the 5-man lineup they had, they couldn't continue with. And they've had to work their way back, and now they're in not bad position. Like, you know, I could at least give credit. Maybe that team could do something. They haven't been to many of the really big tournaments. You know, maybe there's something there. Obviously, they're not good in the context that, like, it's not acceptable to lose them if you're G2 and fnatic. Like, come on.
Yeah. So anyway, back to this Exist era. You know, like, as I said, it's not just about him. We've got to keep on pointing out that fnatic can never really be a complete team. I still stand by. I think JW remains a problematic core of the team. Obviously signed a long-term contract, so he's not going anywhere. Honestly, as well, you know, I think we've been pretty generous to Brolin because of his age and therefore his potential, but it hasn't really been an explosive start. I'm still inclined to be sympathetic, because he's young. And I think if my development was being hampered by having to play with the likes of Exist and having to learn from the likes of Exist, it would probably, piss me off. And in the back of his mind, he's probably thinking this isn't really how it was supposed to be. But he's also got to turn up on the server and fucking get things done, and he hasn't been doing that. So I don't know. I think this fnatic is kind of rotten to the core, and outside of Crims, there's very little positive to talk about it, and I think things are going to get worse for them. I think you're probably inclined to agree, but I'll ask anyway. Is it time to just get rid of Exist off the back of this? Remember, this is a tournament they won under Golden. That's how, and now they're losing to 8. They're getting 16-0'd by AGO at the same tournament a year later.
I think the problem they've got with this current Fnatic lineup, like this is the way I see most of the players in the team, is like if I'm building a Swedish team and say I use the logic right, I know no one would do this, but just for the sake of argument in this scenario, I say, right, I'm going to start with the worst player that's on the team. And you go, right, the worst player, right, I'll start with Exist. You go, yeah, not bad, veteran, probably knows how to run a team, if it's a bit loose, probably work here. And then you go, and you know what? Same worst players, but I'm going to go JW. Well, he's a 3-time major champion. That's not bad, is it? And then you go, then I'm going to go Twist. You go, we're starting to get a bit dodgy if we've still got all these players at the same time. But fair enough, he's a guy who's never really properly lived up to his potential, but maybe he played down to the level of his teams. Then you quickly realise, like, wait a minute, the 15, I think he's like 17 now, maybe. I'm not sure how old Brawlin is, but he roughly was 16 before, right? The 16-year-old's our second best player. Wait a minute. This is already starting to look like a dodgy team. It doesn't matter who we've got as the first best player. I mean, it turns out it's Crims, but it could be fucking simple at this point in time. Why would this team win a tournament? You know what I mean? It's like this is one of the problems I actually feel like a lot of people run into when they try to be the general manager in CSGO. I know because I've seen it so many times myself, Richard, which is when people want to acquire a team or players for their team, they tend to use that logic of like, it's not bad, is it? He's all right, isn't he? And I think I've told you this story before. I had someone talk to me about buying a bunch of teams. Like, what if I was to buy this team? And I would say like, yeah, they're not bad. They're maybe like the 18th in the world. And he went, all right, well, what about this other team then? And they go, maybe 25th if things went well. They could get maybe crack top 20. And he was just going, so none of these teams good? And I go, who did he think was going to be available? Do you think he was going to walk in and get like the 5th best? What are you talking about? Like in his mind, he wanted me to sex up all the angles. Like, well, maybe they could be top 10, maybe it could go. I feel like that's what people do when they recruit players, unfortunately. And so with Fnatic, it's hard not to blame them because they did let themselves decay to the point that these are the players that are available. Like, I have to say, there's been a lot of people, it feels like, have gotten on board with me now, which is when you look at the Swedish scene and you're like, well, to be fair, you have to get Exist, right? No in-game leaders. Well, you have to get, player X because who else is a young talent? It's like at this point in time, Swedes just have to face reality. You have to look outside Sweden. If there really aren't the talents there, so you're genuinely looking at the existence galaxies. If you really think they aren't good enough, then it's time to get people from elsewhere. Like, you know what? Valde might not be able to speak a lick of Swedish. I don't know. It's better than nearly all of you. Literally nearly all of you. And I doubt he needs to know half the shit you're coming to do some of the stuff he does. So I think it's just time where either, like, if there are talents out in the Swedish scene, then more fool these guys for never being able to scout them, figuring out who they are, going down, playing with them, bringing them up, figuring out when it's time to bring them on board. If that's not the case, let's go get some foreign talents because there's a lot of talent in the world. They just don't happen to be Swedish at the moment.
Here's the thing, though. I think kind of talking about the idea that, like, Sweden needs to start bringing in foreign talent is almost like, a great tragedy when you consider
sacrilege.
Every generation in Counter-Strike we've had, there's always been an amazing core set of Swedish players. Now, I still think there are like 3 very good players that you can throw together and have a very, very strong team. But the fundamental areas that they're lacking are they're not producing world-class AWPers for some reason. They don't really have one. And in-game leaders. I honestly think that there was something in the Swedish approach to Counter-Strike that made them stop producing good IGLs, whether it was like, you know, a lot of teams, quite famously, if you've ever talked to them, you know, I know you have, they would be doing it by committee. And they would have this like weird, like you have a figurehead, sure, and a spokesperson, whatever you want to call it. But even in the game, there would be, hey, should we do this? Should we do that? And it's like there were no sort of great tactical masterminds coming out. Indeed, one of the reasons that exists in NIP was that guy was because that was the system. That was how they did it, you know, and everybody would have a turn and everybody would make suggestions and everyone would make ideas. And now here we are in 2019 with like no real great IGLs coming out of Sweden, no great AWPers. And honestly, they also did something a little bit very similar to like what the UK did coming out of Source, when the UK should have been poised to be like one of the top nations in CSGO, given its dominance in Source outside of the French. And basically what happened was you had this group of veteran players that had effectively gatekeeped the scene for so long that no young talent could come through. Now, yes, there's obviously some attitude problems. There's this... actually practice the game? I'm not a virgin, sir. I will never practice. You know, there's like lots of weird cultural shit going on in the UK. But the bottom line was, we had a generation of players that were poised to take over, but the old cunts didn't want to let that happen. So they said, hey, we'll let one or two of you play with us, but we'll control the sponsorships. We'll be the core of the team. And, you know,
we get all our spots. You just play the shit one that's left over.
Yeah, exactly.
That sort of thing.
Yeah, and this is how you ended up seeing, like, you know, guys like, Release, for example, was probably the last great bit of UK talent that came through. And then we had this next generation poised. You know, I want to talk, like, it's become a bit of a meme now to talk about some of these names, but they had the potential. You know, there was like a Weber in there, a Shaney was another guy that could have come through. Shaney does very well in FPL.
A lot of them still play. That's the sad thing. What's a testament to what you're saying right now is if you go in like the last Gfinity one they had, like like fucking a year ago or whatever, and you go and look at like Infused and Endpoint and stuff, they're all still around. And what's mad is some of them, you watch them play, they show flashes of like potential, but they just never developed. They got stuck at like this weird level that's like semi-pro. Don't get too triggered, Dick. Like, they get stuck at that level and then they just never went past it. Because as you're alluding to here, like, it's not as simple as just thinking a guy's just going to pop out a completely rounded player who knows what he's doing. Like, there's almost like an initiation component to it. Like, I know the funny thing is, I even think like there's hubris to this, which is, I could totally get that someone like Flusher, Olaf Meister, they don't think you need to be told what to do. They know what to do better than anyone. The problem with that is they then extended that logic to everyone. And I've heard a lot of pros, admittedly a couple of years ago, because it's hard to say it now when Astralis wins, because you look like a dickhead, saying that like, every top pro knows how to play all the situations and roles in the game and all that. It's like, meanwhile, you go and look at that Danish scene, every single player who's made it to the pro level has been under the tutelage of real in-game leaders with real tactics and roles and setups and all the rest of it, so that they really do have the equivalent of like a sporting like hierarchy where you go from, your juniors to the under 18s to the second team to, that's a real thing.
Yeah. And to then further parallel what happened in the UK or what happened in Sweden, we heard for ages about all these young players that were going to come through and we're going to take over and we're going to do things. Right, Disco Doppelin is washed up. He's 23. He's 23. He's 23 and he played for both Fnatic and Godsent and stood in for NIP, if I remember rightly, at a tournament too. Yeah, where Get Right concluded he was going to be this great player and had all the hallmarks of being a great teammate. That motherfucker went down with the Titanic at Red Reserve. Now, it's not because I don't think the guys like Disco Doppelin, there's others out there like, people talked about Freddie B. I think there was a guy called fucking Rusty in there as well. I mean, like, there's probably a ton of Swedish players that you could name that came this close to being on the top. It's not that these guys don't have the talent or the potential. It's that there's no one to guide them or mold them and sort of bring them through and help them get that extra step away that they need to go. It's like there just isn't anybody like that in the Swedish scene right now, and this is why you have this disconnect of kind of like the past masters are still at the top of the scene, and the people they're using a kind of like bring through into these Swedish lineups aren't good enough, or certainly aren't good enough right now. And that's the key part. And it's like, listen, there's some guys who their shelf life exists. He's past his fucking sell-by date by a long distance as both a player and an in-game leader, probably, honestly. And then meanwhile, you see, like, there was at least, like, a guy like Hampus that was trying to make a go of things, trying to be an in-game leader, trying to get shit going. I mean, Pronac shat on him in his AMA. He said, I think Hampus is a good player, but I think he's a terrible IGL. I don't rate him as an IGL at all. It's like, fucking hell. So the Swedish scene is in a real bad spot, and I think that's really kind of typified and underlined by where we're at with this fucking fnatic team.
Well, here's the thing that tilts me about like this team in particular, because what always happens is this, Richard. If you ever comment on a team, what happens is every now and then a player in one of those teams will be like, you don't know what it's like inside the team and what he brings to the team. And it's like, you know what, mate? 16-0 on LAN by a shit team.
Yeah.
That's you. So you know what? I don't need to know what genius thing your in-game leader said while you're getting 16-0'd. I don't need to know what game plan he came up with while you're getting 16-0'd. I don't need to know what he could have changed and what he told you after the game. You got 16-0'd. That's literally the largest margin you can possibly lose by. Ergo, fuck you and your shit explanations. Now go back to being shit. Like I've always said to players, if you ever have to come at me, you don't have it in the server, because people who have it in the server, I look like a fool. Like if I say your team's not going to be good and you go and peel off the next major, win a couple of tournaments, bang out like fucking, FaZe Clan, a few top teams, what can I say then? If you have to come at the person with like, but you don't technically know why we're bad, it's like, this is just a waste of everyone's time, mate. Like what are we doing here?
And let's be clear, right? Like in CSGO history, there really aren't a lot of 16-0s.
No, very few.
And generally, when a team gets 16-0'd, it is indicative of something being very wrong within the team. It usually symbolizes something. Obviously in recent memory, you've got the MIBR Astralis 16-0, which was probably the catalyst that precipitated all the changes that they had in the lineup. But even like innocuous animals, think about that Renegades.
The classic.
Yeah, the Renegade 16-0.
One of Spudge's finest moments.
No, but again, imagine like that fucking hurts.
That was his version of like what I was describing before, where it's like, give us some bloody credit, will you?
Yeah.
They just go straight in. Sorry, sir, your funds are withdrawn for credit.
Yeah, no. I absolutely wrecked. But also as well, let's go back to 2016. Fnatic doled out a notable 16-0 to FaZe at E-League Season 1. And that was the old FaZe lineup with AZ and Fox and Kiyashima, right? And that was, again, on, let's make some changes here. We're a big brand. These players aren't doing us justice. So there is no getting away from the fact that a 16-0 is generally something that points to the need for change. It is usually in the DIR a very the lowest ebb of a roster. 16-0 at LAN even more so. I think most people will be like, online, any crazy shit can happen. This is at LAN. This is being watched. This is like, you guys turn up, sit down. You're meant to get shit done. So I think for me, if Fnatic now do not make a roster change and don't cut exist and don't look to do something drastic with the team, I think Fnatic have sort of just given up a little bit. And this team is just going to be a placeholder team moving forward.
Well, that's the fear I have, is that I always say this, right? You will very rarely ever find a video of me saying a player should, and I'm not joking, obviously, literally retire. I almost never have said that. That's a complete straw man, anyone ever says it. Go back, any player I criticised a lot, Shroud, Skadoodle, Snacks, fucking Neo, Taz, Exist, go down the line of them, get right. I never said they would retire for exactly this reason. What I always wanted them to do was, do you want to keep playing as a pro? Yes. Right. It's not about you. You shouldn't leave. You should do the best you can. Your team should fire you. And then what should happen is when you're fired, you should be on red reserve. You should be on the third best team in your country. If you were a Shroud back in the day, you should have been on the bad NRGs, because that's the thing. You would then, first of all, be at the level you're at as a player, which is fine. Okay, you can be a player like that. Semphis is still out there playing at that sort of level. No problem with that. And if you're down at that level, you might be able to actually help your fucking scene. You can help some guy who's on the way up. And hopefully at that point in time, you get that it's not about you and your ego, and you realise I'm not going all the way back up again. But this guy might have a chance, so pass on a bit of knowledge to him, reveal a few of the sort of the secrets of the business, as it were. Hopefully he makes it up. And you know what? Swedish Counter-Strike succeeds after all. Because I will say the one caveat I'll give them for this tournament is there have been too many weird results at this tournament in the 3 incarnations we've had of it that I will say it's one of those ones where it does make me wonder what it is about the setup, or if people just aren't used to playing on the Asian time. I don't know what it is, but there are a lot of weird results there. So I don't it's not the end for me, but if you add that to some of the other issues, it is certainly worrying, like on a really serious level, because like this is the point in the tournament where this is smooth sailing from now on. I mean, remember, there never would have been a G2 there, so they only would have needed to have beaten AGO and then Windigo, and then they would have won whatever it was, fucking 500k or something mental.
Yeah. And if I told you those were the 2 teams standing between you and
of course.
you know, it would have been absolutely between 500,000 and your fnatic. You would have been like, that's fucking great. I mean, so crazy shit. And like I said, I won't labor the point. I'm also not going to labor the point with G2, because lest we forget, this isn't this wasn't their lineup. This was the lineup with Body, so it was Body's last.
This is his last one.
Yeah, so that's fine.
And he let them down one last time into the grave.
Of course he did. Yeah. You know, keeping it up. But let's talk a little bit about Windigo winning this tournament. Now, I wanna basically go against the grain here, because, like I said, I read a lot of
unusual
threads.
for you.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I'd say out of the 2 of us, I'm less iconoclastic usually, but I have read too much on this, you know, on the subreddit to sort of allow.
By the way, as a quick aside, just so we can get this part out of the way, because this isn't going to be a big deal. It wasn't a big deal. But did you see when Apex congratulated?
I was going to bring that up after we talk.
Oh, right. Okay. We'll wait for that then. Don't worry about it.
So basically, Windigo 2-0 at AGO in the final. They won the final. Everybody was like raving about them and saying, oh, you know, Windigo. Why are people even surprised that Windigo did well at this
tournament? Not hipsterism. I can't handle
it. It was too much. There was some unbelievable comments across the 2 threads.
Did everyone forget MIBR was in this tournament?
Right.
Remember, about a second before WSG began, Rich, every single expert in the world was telling me MIBR is the team that's going to dethrone fucking Astralis. They've got all the tools, the map. Like, that was the hype. Like, what are they talking about? Oh, what, you're surprised? You know, when people do that thing, which it tilts me beyond belief, is people take the concept of probability, right? And they use speech, which is implicitly based around probability, like chance, surprise. And they make it clear by how they're speaking that on the one hand, they're saying that the team has a less than 50% chance to do something. But then they say, of course, if they did do it, wouldn't surprise me. It's like, do you hear the 2 statements you just made there? They don't make sense. Like, that doesn't actually make sense at all. If you wouldn't be surprised, then it must have a fucking greater than 50% chance of happening. Do you know what that means? Like, what is this?
Yeah. So, like, some of the comments that I saw were just like, it was, you want to talk about fucking Marvel's latest fucking superhero. Captain Hindsight was fucking getting free promotion all over the subreddit about how nobody should have been surprised, and MIBR, when they lost to them, they should have expected Windigo to pull out like a win on Overpower. It's insane. It's insane the shit I've been reading the past few days. But let's just be clear about what's happened here with Windigo. Now, listen. Obviously, they've got some players that we definitely used to talk about in glowing terms back in 2015. Victor, they used to call him Vactor.
Yes.
Obviously, Bubble had his moments.
Bubble was a solid player.
Yeah, but these guys played in international lineups back when people were becoming enamored with the idea of having the Bulgarians back in the international scene. Once again, going all the way back to when they were, Headshot, BG, or whatever the fuck, and then, various iterations and sponsorships of the team that they had off the back of that. But anyway, here's what happened for Windigo. So first of all, it does have to be said that when you're playing for big money in what is likely to be the only opportunity you will have for big money, there is a fire lit under you. There is an extra motivational factor. This is basically a major to the likes of Windigo and AGO, because they will never have a deep run at a major. They'll probably never even qualify for a major. That's the reality. So that gives you that extra motivational fact. Then you are coming up against teams who, for want of a better word, they're not treating this seriously. We've heard so many top teams say, "Fuck WESG. I'm there for a check. I'm there for the money. It's an excuse to go to China and just take some easy money. Blah blah blah." So they're all
that does make you wonder. Then actually, when I was saying before about all the upsets, it can't be a great mindset to go into the tournament like, all these teams are shit, and we're probably just going to beat them easily. And that's got to be the worst mindset, surely, to have.
Yeah, and whatever you want to say about MIBR, I'm not saying they were playing to lose or holding back strats or any of the excuses the average Brazilian fan came up with. But the reality is, were they preparing for Windigo in the same way they prepared for Astralis at the major? No, of course they weren't. That is the barometer of what they can do moving forward as a team, not this anomaly.
Sure.
That's what it will be over the next 3 months. Now, if I'm wrong and it turns out that MIBR, keep losing games, fair enough. But I don't think that's going to happen. The other factor in all of this, Ships had, this is his career best tournament. Like, coming in to this event, everybody was saying you got to watch Poison. He's the, AWP sensation, good enough to be on, he's going to be like the next Cirque, good enough to be on an international anthem. Poison was actually very muted this entire tournament, and was certainly muted in the 2 games I watched him play in. He did an interview saying, well, this won't affect my confidence. Probably should a little bit, mate, because the hype behind you from people that have been watching like your MDL games, watching your online games, for you to flop like this at a tournament where these teams were susceptible, isn't a great look for you. And on top of that, you've got Ships, who is a player nobody was talking about, and his stats are insane for this event. Like, he'll never have an event like this again at LAN. Never, just never. It's not possible. No, he cannot do that. He's made a name for himself. Everyone's like, oh, player 2
like
was in the game.
Numbers, mate.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, look at them. Look at the fucking state of his statistics. It's ridiculous. I think in the final he did back-to-back 30s or something. It's wild.
Meanwhile, he's coming off. 2 lands ago, he delivered half those stats at the Bucharest Gaming Week invitation. Yeah. Get me out. Did this kind of just like sell it? What sort of mad Faustian pact did he have to perform before this event?
So this is what I'm saying. So if people think that he's going to maintain this form, listen, I can point you to so many players historically, some of them household names, some of them players that you probably don't even remember, that had a tournament like this. And they don't do it in a sustained fashion, because you cannot do it in a sustained fashion. Like, Simple does this in a sustained fashion. He will, Ships will not be doing this in a sustained fashion. So you have to factor all of that in. So all the people, to me, saying that Windigo are going to be like, oh, this is what's going to spur them on to being a great international team. I've been wrong about stuff on this show before. I'll always own my shit. I would be very fucking surprised if Windigo go on a tear and, you know, emerge from this pack of like MDL teams, start going to LAN regularly and you know, performing to this caliber. It's not going to happen. None of that's going to happen. I'm super happy for them winning a tournament of this size, especially for the likes of Victor and Bubble, who've been grinding for years.
Sure.
For years and never had a taste of this. Super happy for those guys. But at the end of the day, this is like their perfect storm, and it will never be replicated again. And if you remember what the movie The Perfect Storm is about, it is about a bunch of fishermen who get on a boat, and they're like, hey, holy shit, look at all these fish that we've got in the nets. And they think, we're rich, this is it. We're going to make a fortune. And it just so happens that they're between 3 fucking hurricanes, and all the fish are fucking trying to get away from it and driving them into the nets as they try and find somewhere safe to go. And off they go on their boat. Well, we all know how that story ends. They're all fucking dead. So, and that's Windigo. So enjoy this. This is the fish. This is the good time.
And they're called ships.
Not bad, eh? I didn't even think of that. That's why you're here, Duncan.
Exactly.
So let's talk about the controversy now that sort of came out, as you already alluded to. And I'm loath to call it a controversy. I don't know why this is the state of where we're at. And I'm going to drop some fucking knowledge on some people, but let's just get into this first. So Apex, you might know him, French player, nice guy, you know.
Not the future of esports game.
No, not the future esports game that Dr. Disrespect and Ninja have both already publicly announced they'll be walking away from now that they cash those checks. To be fair, I don't know if the doc cashed the check, and I do like the doc, and he did a great Astralis thing, so he's all right in my book. But just if you're a games developer and you want people to plug your game and get people hyped for your game, definitely put into the contract that they subsequently then can't say publicly, I will never be playing this game again, because it's bad optics, and that definitely, pretty much, I would say, counteracts all of the things that you paid the $1 million for. Just a little pro tip for you. Get that in your contract, guys. I can help you with these things because I'm an expert. But anyway, Apex, known for being a nice guy. People don't know this in the scene, right? Dan is a known nice guy in the scene. Think about it.
Way, he's someone where I'm not exaggerating. Even when I'm flamed him, I don't think he's ever come back at me. Like, he might have, like, as a joke attempted, but I think he's ever been mad.
He has never took it bad. He will always say hello. He will always have a drink and make time for people. But also, as well, behind the scene, he's like, you know, he's known for being the guy that, like, on his teams, if there's somebody like having a rough time, or, you know, he's the guy who takes the time out. Very famously, I mean, this is why him and Kenny S are like always together at events, because back when Kenny S was fucking, you know, having, how should we say, young people issues with his temperament, there were some players around him who didn't want to deal with that shit, didn't want to help him out. Quite famously, RPK, who used to sit next to him back in the very, very early days, it drove him into retirement. The prospect of never being able to overthrow NIP, and you've got to sit next to some mardy-ass teenager at the same time. RPK said, fuck it, I'd rather go be a mechanic, actually. This is better. Fuck this. And then he, you know, went away for like 2 years, right? Not Apex. That's not how Dan rolls. He's like, listen, come on, you know, we can do it. We'll hang out. We'll get to know each other. You know, we'll have a few drinks and we'll relax, and then I'll tell you about some shit and try and impart you with some knowledge. Dan is a known nice guy. You won't find many better than that in Counter-Strike. So he made a tweet, which I don't know if you can bring it up, Sam, but it's innocuous.
Was in the sort of wheelhouse of the tweets where I make a compliment and then everyone attacks me by going out the way to misread it. It was that sort of a tweet, wasn't it? Because it was so clearly meant to be a compliment.
Well, I mean, look, like, he was pretty much trying to say the thing that I just said, which is these players have been grinding for years, never had a taste of the big money, right? And remember, Dan's played against these guys. He's talked to these guys at events. So he said the beautiful part for AGO or Windigo players is if they win, they will be able to buy a house in their country. Really happy for the winner, no matter what. But let's go, Bubble and Victor. You guys deserve it. This was then met with a reaction that I think, again, it just typifies where we're at with social media. It was a mistake. Along with reality television, it's driven everyone mentally ill, because we all labor under this delusion of importance and access that we should never have. And people started saying, "Oh, how can you say this? This is like saying that they live in a third world country." Which he doesn't say that. He also clarified in a further tweet, you could, for the same amount of money, you could buy a small house in France in some parts.
Mate, there were some people in that thread who absolutely begged belief. I saw, there's one guy, I've got it here for you. It's a great one. A guy goes, I have to change your mind a little bit. Okay, you can buy a house in Poland, house for 100K in Poland, but that would be dog house in city, right? First of all, that's a categorical lie. Like, I can tell you right now, it's absolute nonsense. And the reason why I thought this was absolute nonsense especially is because, mate, you could buy a house in Middlesbrough 100% for 100K.
But mate, yeah.
Absolutely. No, a pretty good one as well.
Do you remember when they fucking stripped out South Bank? And they completely, you know, when you go through South Bank, all this is Middlesbrough talk, by the way, guys, where they had all of the green metal plates, you know, over the houses, and you could go, and I don't know why anyone would want to live there, because I lived over there for a bit. And as I've said before, I literally had a house party, a barbecue, and someone came into the house just through the front door we didn't know. And while we were having beers and that, I went into the room to like get some music for the CD player. This, and there was a guy lifting up the computer, and we were like, what are you doing, mate? And he went, what, are you all not robbing this house? And I'm like, no, we actually do live here. And he went, all right. And he put the computer down and said, we got a beer. Right, now you can fuck off out of this party. That's what, right, anyway, that was South Bank. £4,000.
Yeah, there you go.
4,000, because nobody wanted to fucking live there, and the houses were shit. £4,000.
Like, I would just say this, okay? If you are someone and you're not trolling who comes from Bulgaria or Poland and you dispute these claims, I'd like to see your calculation on your country's GDP. I'd like to see how you figure that out, because logically, you all need to live in a house, don't you, you daft cunt? So how do you live in houses if they all cost fucking 400K, you fucking moron? What's the average salary? Think it through. Think it through.
It's wild. But anyway, so there was all this implication, by the way. You're saying that Bulgaria is a third world country. You're saying Poland is a third world country.
Not any sort of inferiority complex.
Yeah, just crazy, right? Crazy that you would even get there. But let me also just explain, right? What third world is, right? Because a lot of people think it's an economic term.
Yes.
Wrong. Once again, you're an idiot, right? It's not an economic term. Let me explain to you. There was this thing called the Cold War. Me and Duncan remember it. You kids probably don't. And during the Cold War, there was terminology applied to geographical parts of the world to denote their standing within the Cold War. And if you were allied with the Western Bloc, because this was a Western concept, you were a first world country. This was Europe, the USA. If you were allied with the Eastern Bloc, the communists, you were a second world country. And that was all of Eastern Europe and Russia and China. And then if you were in Africa or South America, who had their own shit going on and couldn't give a fuck about the Cold War, you were called a, wait for it, third world country. So never in Bulgarian and Polish history have they been denoted a third world country. Never could that label apply. But equally, if you're using that terminology, they can never be a first world country. Remember, it's not economics. They would always have to be a second world country. Now, I don't know if you got the memo, but the fucking Cold War is over. It's been over for a while, supposedly. But in what world, first of all, could you even be offended by the term? And because it doesn't mean in your mind what you think it means. It doesn't mean that. And then second of all, in no way can it be inferred from what he's saying, right? If you want to talk about the phenomenon.
Also, what do you imagine you can buy? What you think in the third? Like they think, Richard, that the third world's like Somalia, obviously, right? And in their mind, you just rock up to Somalia. How much is this house? 100 grand. Again, what sort of economic realities are we living in here, boys? What are we living in here?
Yeah, but this is what I'm talking about. This is about economies of scale, right? That's all it is, and it is an observable phenomenon. If you are trying to explain to me that, okay, let's just say as well in Sofia in Bulgaria, yeah, there are some very expensive houses. Great place to live. It's got a thriving. It's got a thriving games development industry, a thriving tech industry. You know, it's like I said, back in the fucking 90s, the late 90s, when we had a student exchange program between Teesside University and Sofia University, and Bulgarians came to Middlesbrough, the Bulgarians were horrified at how people were living in the northeast of England. I remember distinctly. They were asking me, like, where's the tennis courts? Oh, no, we don't have like free luxurious tennis courts everywhere, mate. What do you do for fun? Oh, we just drink and fight in that. They couldn't handle it. They couldn't wait to get back to Bulgaria, right? For obvious reasons, because Middlesbrough's shit. The fact remains, though, that if I wanted to buy a house in Bulgaria, it would be eminently cheaper than it would be even if I was buying a house in Middlesbrough or somewhere nearby. Not all parts of Middlesbrough. That's called economies of scale. That's just how the world works. There is nothing racist about this. There is nothing derogatory about this. I legit couldn't believe. And as I said, front page Reddit post, 204 comments over this innocuous throwaway compliment. Top comment from Danger Avocado: just buy a house, forehead. What does that?
What a shit joke.
Yeah, but what does that even mean? What do you even say? He's not. I mean, if you had.
This is also what Twitch chat has done to people as well, Richard. Is people actually think it's like a valid form of communication?
Oh, sure.
Like, you're not in Twitch chat, so what's the joke there?
I don't get it. But then. You know, it's like that comment is talking about how you can't get a house these days if you're a young person, which is a phenomenon I imagine that doesn't apply to people who have massive six-figure windfalls through their job. So I don't even understand that reference. I don't understand why that joke.
Yeah, no, like in what universe does that even make sense?
Top upvoted comment, 500. And like I say, there's some comments in that thread that are just fucking mind blowing. Also, as well, there was this weird like breakaway chain going. Well, they need to be paid first. There has literally not been any history or intimation or anything about WESG not paying.
There'd be no top teams there in the third version if people didn't get paid. Rest assured, that is the only reason to go.
Yeah. So,
especially because remember, they are funded by Alibaba. Like, I don't know if you guys know anything about that company. They're pretty much making a little fucking pretty penny every time they rock up with their shop.
Mm. Yeah, unbelievable. And again, there was a comment in there going, right, check this out. $40,000 in Sofia won't even buy you a tiny apartment. Right? Okay. First of all, they've all made more than 40,000. Let's double it then. Does 80,000 get me a tiny apartment?
Let me tell you a detail, right? So I made this point on Twitter. The most successful Counter-Strike player to ever come from Bulgaria was actually a personal friend of mine. It was the player Steel, not the other Steel, obviously. Confusing because he was also Canadian, unfortunately. But he was like, he lived in French Canada. Yeah. And he emigrated to Canada when he was maybe like 7. And it was, during the, it wouldn't have been during the Cold War. Let me think, it would have been, no, it must have been. I think it was maybe when the Cold War was just about to end. And when he came to America, Canada rather, and became a top pro, blah, 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 I was a friend of mine, got to know him, etc. And he obviously used to tell me what it was like back in Bulgaria at the time. And yeah, obviously under the Soviets, it was fucking pretty dire, it was communist and all the rest of it, etc. Again, what economic reality do people imagine has happened since 1991 that now in Bulgaria, it would be this expensive that you couldn't even get it, like he's saying here, for that sort of money. Like, would we not have heard about like the tech boom and the fucking like? Bulgaria isn't South Korea, you know. It hasn't had something where it's gone from like a feudal state to like fucking top of the world in like all economic. Like, what world are these people living in? It's like, why do people who are 18-year-olds already have to tell the rest of us about how shit works in the real world? It's like when cunts tell me how the tax system works when they've never paid any tax, and I pay more tax than they fucking make. Like, what is this shit?
It's just a fucking really strange thing to be upset about, and again, like, you know, no one's saying anything disparaging about Poland, about Bulgaria, like by saying you can buy a house in these countries for this amount. There's you know, and again, people are saying, yeah, they do use third world to denote economy. They don't do that anymore. In fact, actually, you don't apply third world and second world. It's considered offensive. People are going, oh, what about? I've just Googled the OECD. Congrats. They use the term developing countries, which, by the way, there's a debate about whether or not you can use that, because people get upset because the inference is between developed and developing. It's just a bizarre thing to get upset about, and to aim aggressively at one of the nicest guys in the scene who was legitimately trying to pay somebody a compliment and highlight how hard these pro players have been struggling for.
That's the other thing. It's like, if you look at the wording of the tweet, how the fuck would that be a BM tweet?
I know.
Look at the wording of it. It's like whoever has read that as a bad tweet has gone out of their way to fuck their mind through a literal gold medal mental gymnastics performance on the fucking balance beam, fucking, I don't know, whatever the horse thing's called, and then up onto them rings that go.
I've got the comment that highlights that point. Right
here we go.
Vicaris. The beautiful part is their countries are poor, in like air quotes. Gee, thanks. Thank you, glorious superior Westerner. I bow down and kiss your feet as a poor motherfucker like me should. You are truly morally superior to be happy for me, possibly overcoming my crippling poverty.
Mate, imagine these people in real life. Oh, well, have a nice day. Why? Because a poor little cunt like me could never have a life, could I? The existential terror I probably live in because I don't have money like you and I never went to your school and I don't know any of your friends. And then all of a sudden just literally launches into like, I never had a dad. I never had all the good things. Like the fucking... The end of This Is England, by the way, that was, in case anyone... I've updated my references at least, and that's like, solid 2000s or something, right?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's just early 2000s anyway, but whatever.
I'm into the 200s at this point in time.
No, that's good. It's good. It's well done. And like that guy was like, right, he goes, even if he didn't mean it, which I don't know how you can.
I'm already in for this one. Let me just strap in. Even if he didn't mean it,
right? No, so he said, I've lived in France long enough to know precisely what he meant. But even if he didn't mean it,
excuse me, what, he's got the code book, has he?
Yeah. He's got the French code book. But even if he didn't mean it, it's clearly a tweet that sounds superior.
Mate, is so mad.
Of how they're third world countries and the prize money is more important for people from those countries. And don't get me started about how I shouldn't think that. Any Bulgarian or Eastern European person in general who has lived in the West has been acted superior to more times than he can name. I still read news daily in French and other places I've lived in where they pull out how shit Bulgaria and Romania are. It's like, I don't know, mate. Maybe this is about you and not what it is.
I just like the fact that because he's beat, by the way, exactly the sort of rationale that people always get really mad at people if they ever say, like, oh, I was in Poland for a while. Shut the fuck up. You don't know anything about Poland. Like, you know, you can't ever say that. This cunt's been to France and therefore knows what Apex's mind contains. And also can speak for all Eastern Europeans and Bulgarians. Yeah. I've got a quick piece of logic that actually does check out. There is some shit things about those countries. It's everyone posting those fucking comments. We've narrowed that part down.
Yeah, that was. It's just so ridiculous, the things. And again, we haven't had. It feels like we haven't had a big fucking actual outrage in CS:GO for a while. So I guess shit like that has to do, right? Of course,
I've let everyone down, haven't I? I've got to step my game.
Yeah, step your game.
Tweeting about the game too much.
Yeah. it's interesting as well, by the way, as I just want to point out, right? Apex paying some fellow pros a compliment. Front page discussion thread, 204 comments. League completely dedicated to match fixing. People being DDoSed like it's 2014 again. Admins hosting secret meetings to try and explain away why they cannot kick said match fixers out of the league, right? All exposed, all public knowledge. 14 net upvotes, 4 comments on Reddit. Fuck you all. You are scum. There you go. So yeah, I just thought that was absolutely ridiculous. But yeah, it's par for the course. It's where we're at right now. Right, let's talk about some of the other roster changes that have been going on out there.
This is got to be one of the maddest roster manias I've seen in a long while, because it started like there wasn't going to be one. You thought there was going to be like one change, NRGL change, but all of a sudden it's like all these teams are just opening up. And in fact, even when people how often have you seen this, Richard, where there's a report someone's going here, and then the next day there's a report, no, he's going to this other team, and then there's next to it, like now they were linking like Sonny with HellRaisers as well. Like, what the fuck? It's like, how is this guy simultaneously going to 3 teams?
Right, well,
none, because he's still technically on Mouse Sports. Like, what?
We'll get to that, but obviously one of the things that we fucking missed, and we definitely missed the trick with this, and we should have called this one, because looking back, it's so fucking obvious. We were talking about what's Oscar going to do, where's he going to end up? Well, of course, obviously, Oscar obviously came from HellRaisers, played in that team before, and obviously feels comfortable there. So it's been announced that Oscar's going back to HellRaisers. I mean, honestly, with Woxic going out, it's a very solid replacement. But I kind of feel that, I don't know, this probably sounds a little bit harsh. I kind of feel that this move, and just how Oscar is in general, like, he's no spring chicken. Let's be real about it. What is he, like 28?
At least, maybe even 29 now.
Yeah, let me just double check his age here. Yeah, it says here on Wikipedia he's only 27 actually. So
fair enough.
I'm surprised.
To be fair, he also has that MSL thing going on where after age 21 he's just looked the same age for the entire time.
So he's 28 this summer, so he's 28 in a few months. But anyway, like, he's getting towards the end of his career. He had a pretty good run in Mouse Sports. It was problematic. It was in and out. There was a period of time where a lot of people were talking about him as potentially the best AWPer in the world, asking whether or not, he could sort of replace Guardian and, all these other, like, he had a good run. I think if you say, I'm now going to move to HellRaisers at age 28, I think you're pretty much just saying, like, I'm just playing for a salary at this point.
This is a victory lap.
Yeah, exactly. I don't have any aspirations of winning a tournament, nor do I have any aspirations of being even considered the best in my field again. And look, I've always said he's an idiosyncratic person with quirks to his personality. So like his options were always limited. If he could have overcome those, this is a guy who could have been going to NA right now, making a fortune. Like, the time is ripe for Oscar.
He's one of those ones, mate, where I would have people even like normally what happens is a team says something, you have the one you would recommend or whatever. I would have people like actively asking if he would consider an offer. And I was like, I can put you in contact, man. He's not going to say yes, mate. Like, and you wouldn't believe, like, I mean, I'm sure you know this, like, Americans just can't wrap their head around the idea you don't want to desperately live in their country. Like, they ask me this all the time for some jobs. I'm like, you know what? No offense, but I'm all right as I am. Like, but you could live. I could get you the visa and everything. It's like, not everyone wants that. Believe it or not.
Yeah, no. I mean, we've been quite famously Simple.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, Simple made a point of explicitly saying that, yes, even though when he was on Liquid, there were issues within the team with some of the personalities, for him, the prospect of living in America wasn't this, like, great. And again, I'm going to sound like that cunt on the forums now, oh, thanks, mighty America, rescuing me, an Eastern European. Like, for him, it wasn't a dream of his. It wasn't an aspirational aspect. For him, the dream is being able to stay at home with with his girlfriend, close to his family, and making the money and playing for a top team. That was like his win condition in his mind. It wasn't as easy as saying I'll just go to America and play on Team Liquid. And I'm sure for a lot of people, perhaps even the majority of people, that would have been a great prospect, but it isn't what he wanted. With
But
Oscar,
to be fair, Oscar has a family.
yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And this is what I mean. It's like, he's an old
I
guy.
get it.
Got a family. Like, yeah, I totally understand it as well. Why you, especially at that age, you wouldn't want to, haul yourself up, move to another country, get a visa, have to do all this stuff. So I totally understand it. He said in a statement, he said, HellRaisers was the first team that showed interest in me. I really like Angel. I wasn't sure at first because I really needed a break from CS, but eventually I decided to sign for a short period. I will do my best to not disappoint HR. In general, it feels good to be back, and I can't wait to fire up and destroy the dreams of some teams. There's so many loaded elements to this statement. That, first of all, he basically says it was this or retirement effectively in his statement. He also makes it explicitly clear that he's only signing for a short time. So in CS terms these days, that's probably 3 to 6 months. He also says, in general, it feels good to be back. So not entirely. And he also says he wants to destroy the dreams of other teams, meaning we have no dreams of our own.
Yeah, exactly.
we don't aspire to win.
It's
but
like,
we will
ironically,
spoil other teams. Yeah.
Considering their HellRaisers, I remember, I forget where I heard this comment, but it was such a poignant comment. I always remember it, where it said, "In hell, even the demons suffer." It's like that's actually the only ethos you can have in HellRaisers. It's like, we can't win the tournament, but maybe we could fuck up your tournament and bring you down with us, like sound.
And let's be clear again. There's a reason why I think this move isn't great for Oscar in terms of what he could have had on the table had he not wanted to make these life choices, which obviously you have to respect. But HellRaisers have come out of a dreadful performance at the Major. Clearly gone backwards. The Hobbit move hasn't worked out at all. That's been one of the worst transfers probably of the last year, in terms of what was promised, what the prospect was, to what it actually delivered. Like, this is a guy who won, like, again, at 24, it's probably a bit weird, but he did win, like, Rookie of the Year in 2018 or whatever it was for the Game Awards thing. Or it might have been 2017, sorry. This is a player that a lot of people were excited about. Or could he be on one of these top CIS teams? Well, he's just gone so far backwards. And it's really strange that he's done it in a team where you have an in-game leader that's very famous for developing players and getting way beyond their value. Issa, who was somebody that was really making a lot of headlines and getting a lot of attention last year. He seems to be in a bit of a funk right now. This is what happens. It's like when you're on form and you're A game and everything's working for you and you're playing in a team that's not so great and you look good on it, what happens next? What does your chapter 2 look like? And he's somebody that's struggling right now. I mean, they've done the right thing in benching Dead Fox. But honestly, I think HellRaisers is sort of destined to become a player's graveyard, and that's what Oscar has chosen. So not a very exciting move for me, and I don't think HellRaisers are going to turn it round and suddenly become anything special just by virtue of him being there.
The main thing about this move that's a killer is that, like you say, this didn't have to be the end of the story. I mean, even seeing him mouse sports as an option, I'd love to see what someone like Carrigan would do with him, especially fresh off playing with Guardian, etc. He'd obviously have a great mind for how to use him. There were definitely plenty of other teams that were available. Like as you say, if it was possible to go to NA, mate, I could get Jack to snap this guy's arm off signing it. Of course, join Cloud9. Why wouldn't you? To instantly re-up. So with that said, though, in light of Oscar's career and the fact that if you came from his region until CSGO came along, you never could even dream of accomplishing the things he's accomplished. So even though he only got sort of, like 2 years of that, well, it's still pretty cool. I bet he never thought he'd have that kind of final chapter to his pro career after so many years grinding away. Another person who was, in the fucking trenches for a solid 10 plus years before they ever saw the real, actual like tangible success. Obviously the success of being good and enjoying playing the game, but never got to really showcase something special. So I think that was cool. I can understand the whole angle on if you've got a family, etc., and choosing to play at a lower level, because like I've said about many people from some of those countries, I would stick around. As long as you've got any drive at all to play the game still, you can still get a nice salary. You can still compete at a lower level. If you've ever seen what the prize money's like, I think you get like 50k if you win like a DreamHack Open nowadays. Like there's still solid money in the tier 2 scene. So nobody's necessarily go anywhere nowadays. And you never know if you fluky win to a major. You might still get to play one of the big tournaments every now and then anyway. So
and you can buy a house if you won one of those tournaments.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed.
But yeah, so anyway, not very excited about it. There's another move that's probably worth talking about for a few reasons. Obviously, we haven't talked a lot about Heroic. They've been kind of, percolating away without a lot of attention. Have the occasional good result. Don't really seem to have any sustained success. But recently, they were making roster moves. A lot of people said, "Oh, you didn't talk about Neo being a stand-in for Heroic." I mean, that's because it was very obvious that was just something to do for Neo, and it was never going to become a permanent move. No matter how it worked out, it was literally him just, doing a favor to a bunch of people that he has competed against, and he knows Freiburg and that sort of thing, and that's fine. Well, they've now got rid of Vasilian. And have brought in Starvin on, not permanent. It's still being billed as a trial, but that Starvin was another 16-year-old prospect from Denmark that we've talked about a few times on the show. We think he's got some potential in there. He was definitely a player that was kind of worth saving from Fragsters. If you remember, we said the two players that we would have took from that Fragsters lineup was Starvin and Refresh, and obviously Refresh has been out there as well, joining Optic. So, I gotta say this is a decent move for Heroic. I still think Heroic is a deeply problematic team, and now with Blame F or Blamf or Blamf or however the fuck you say his name, he's now moved to IGL. He's not really proven in that regard. I still don't think this is going to be a team that's poised to make great waves anytime in the near future, even with the addition of an exciting, young player. Remember, they still have Peacemaker as a coach, guys. So, it's not all roses, certainly, but it's definitely a step in the right direction for Heroic and what they need to be, I think, at this moment in time. What do you think?
Yeah, the weird thing about the Heroic team is it really says it all that they've actually swapped in-game leaders so many times in that team. Like, I think Freiburg did it. I know they had Essetag do it. That's why the only reason, as far as I can tell, they drafted in Asilian, because that's what he's kind of like the Danish Crystal at this point in time. You just bring him in, you see if he's an in-game lead.
Only 22 as well, by the way. It's mad what a journeyman he is.
Oh, of course.
For someone so young. And he just can't get a solid team right now. Yeah. Sorry, go on.
And to be fair, like on that one, if you've been booted off that many teams, there's probably something to it. I wouldn't claim to know what it is, but I'd imagine something probably doesn't pan out after like 2 months or something. So the big problem with the Heroic team is, I don't know what the point of the team is. It's just people who've been rejected from other teams, as far as I can tell. Like I know people go there, hoping they can kickstart their career. And to be fair, the weird thing about them as a squad is, if you look at the names on paper, you're like, yeah, it's a bit of an underwhelming lineup. They're actually better than the lineup is if you died. I think he's died.
So anyway, where we got to when the internet went down was Starvin joining Heroic and this Heroic lineup, and then the internet went down. It was crazy. I could actually hear your thoughts on it coming through, and then you were just going, have they gone?
Yeah,
hello?
you were talking to us like, I'm all alone.
Yeah.
I'm all alone.
Yeah.
All right.
We can hear you for like 2 minutes.
Sometimes do that bug, didn't it? Where like one person can hear the other one, they can't. Okay. Good job I didn't say anything else.
Yeah. Fucking hate you.
He's like, God, that cunt.
Unprofessional.
But anyway, so we were talking about Starvin joining the Heroic team. It's kind of a departure with more traditional, shall we say, method of.
They usually prefer to get them
acquiring
when they're
talent.
washed up. Yeah,
Yeah,
not,
exactly.
not on the upside.
So, and what you were saying last time was that you didn't really understand kind of thematically what they were trying to do. I mean, at least they are heading back towards
Yeah.
a Danish lineup. I mean, my understanding is Freiburg actually does speak Danish as well, if I remember rightly, with Adam. So but although I'm pretty sure when I talked to Fifth Lauren about it, he said Adam thinks he could speak Danish. So I don't know what to believe.
Maybe all the rest of the Danes are just going like, yeah. And they just don't, tell him like, none of that's Danish.
But anyway, so I'll let you finish off your points about heroic, and then we'll move on to some more interesting.
Right, yeah, and you reminded me actually there. That was the basic point, was that, which is I never got what the premise of heroic was, even from the very beginning of the team. Like, obviously, when it first began, and it was just the real Danish lineup, and they were trying to become the second best Danish team, which at one point in time they weren't that far off doing it, admittedly, because North had sort of shit the bed at that point in time. But then after that, as soon as they got Freiburg and they started to head towards this lineup where, sure, they had Modi anyway, but Modi, as far as I know, does like speak Danish and had no problems doing that. As soon as they started to go like the international route, it did just become some sort of weird, fucked up like retirement home for players who just couldn't get on other teams for some reason, or were just rejected along the way. So as a team, and I get the reason why the players in the team would play it. They're hoping for a mixture of redemption or just a player check at this point in time. But I could never really buy that it was an idea where they ever really thought that these players are going to get much better or that the team's ever going to be a top team. So actually, if you look at the last few recruitments they've done, like ignoring the Assyrian one, which I get why they did. They wanted to try out having a proper in-game leader. Mertz, that's a pretty decent gamble to take if you're heroic. The difference was on North, the expectations were a lot higher. Actually, if you look at the level of heroic, was that taking on Mertz, pretty decent gamble. Taking on Starvin right now, again, pretty good gamble. Guy who's still on the rise, still looking pretty solid overall. Yeah, I think actually, if you look at the last few trades they've done, they seem to be heading in the right direction. It's just that, again, I still just don't really know what the point of this team is. Like, I never really understood within Refresh what the concept was for this team. Like, whether they really thought it was going to be like they would sell it for fucking millions because it would become a top 5 team or something. I never really got what the point of the team was.
Well, I think that was the whole idea, wasn't it? It was you had your Godsent, your Astralis, your Heroic, and maybe Norse as well. I can't remember. They certainly had a similar looking logo. I'd need to go back in time and check all my notes. But I think the plan was just basically to have these player-owned organizations basically asset flip them all for profit somewhere down the line. Now, around about the time where Refresh sort of, extricated themselves from this organization, you can see that their recruitment policy changed quite a bit, and in the caliber of players they're attracting, and
do you think that would that suggest then? Do you think that they were basically at one point in time, Refresh was maybe a bit cynical, and they were even like, okay, it doesn't matter if this player's not that great now. Freiburg, an obvious example, is a big name. If we're going to flip the team at some point anyway, kind of good to have big names, isn't it? As opposed to like trying to sell someone. No, the potential's great. Like, these players will be good one day.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. That's why I think it's very abundantly clear that when they did sell the rights, I mean, they absolutely have nothing to do with this team right now, because right now this is basically just a placeholder. The people who own Heroic now are probably thinking, didn't really want this team, but on a long enough time scale, hey, esports is big. We've all read the Newzoo report. It's all going to pay off somewhere down the line. And they're basically just keeping, it's like a car that you never drive, but you go in once a week and start the engine, keep it ticking over, keep it in good condition. That's basically what's happening here with Heroic as far as I see it. Now, maybe that's a completely unfair assessment. Maybe, they do have some sort of legitimate drive to do a bit more. I mean, they did have, I can't remember what tournament it was, but I think it was the first one they went to with Peacemaker, and, they didn't do terribly. They had a decent run, and they've got, obviously, Copenhagen games coming up, which Not a lot of top teams will be in attendance. I imagine Astralis will miss that one as well, despite being domestic. So they'll be in with a chance of having a deep run in that tournament, which will be good for confidence and experience and everything else. So maybe I'm being a bit down on them. It's just like, it just feels that they've just been around for so long. And I'm always skeptical of any team that wants to throw fucking Peacemaker a gig.
Oh, of course. The thing that kills me about this team is just like, it's not even just that I don't get the theme of the team. I don't think those players did, mate. Like, whenever I talked to any of those players, like they were at CS Summit. The thing is, all the players in the team, this is what's weird, is they all seemed very comfortable and very easy, because I think almost they knew that, like, the expectations aren't particularly that great for the team. You just play in the team, you do your job. It's kind of like having a job. You just do your job, 9 to 5, there we go, did my best. Did we do well? Cool. If we didn't, well, we'll get them next week. And then who knows who does the recruitment and how that works. Like I said, the last few have been pretty good. But even then, that's a weird aspect, because then there's that whole angle where, wasn't this the team where people were saying that they've made that Blame F guy the in-game leader now?
Yeah.
Because that's a weird movie, I have to say. Because when he came into the team, he looked like he was the fucking stud, like he was the next star player. So bit of a weird angle on that one. I mean, I know they have tossed in-game leader role around in a bunch of positions, but that's also what I mean, where I wonder if the team themselves know what their direction of the squad is. Because they've now got actually the talent pieces where they probably could be a half-decent team. They've got some pretty decent pieces here, but you've got to have all that stuff nailed down. Like, you can't keep swapping the in-game leader role around or just taking one player in and out every 3 months. You've got to have like that run where you get, a proper set of tournaments under your belt, and whoever is the in-game leader has a proper span of time where he's not just putting band-aid fixes on there. He's doing a real approach that he hopes, 6 months from now, if everything goes well, you're a top team. You're actually a legit top 10 team where you can do stuff. Although I have to say, one thing I do appreciate is I've never cared about watching the tier 2 tournaments, but I like the fact they exist. I like the fact that if you're a player, you don't have to just be winning the massive championships. And one of the reasons I think that's underrated about why I'm glad there is a tier 2 scene is because one thing I've always hated in esports is when the scene's so top heavy that if you have a bad year as a player, you might just end up retiring or you won't be able to get on a top team. Tier 2, in theory, could allow some of these players to have the bad year and then do the comeback. You start to raise your level again. One of the top teams can still have their eye on you, and then you can get back into a team. So I kind of like that component. And I think that's probably the area that, considering the prize purses for the top events haven't gone too crazy the last few years, people probably haven't paid enough dues to the fact that the tier 2 seat's fucking pretty stacked, actually. There's so many teams attend, so many tournaments. You can make a good living now in that tier 2 seat.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And, as we've seen, occasionally you do get one team, break away from that tier 2 pack. And given the current state of the top 10 in World Counter-Strike, you can have huge impact. I mean,
sure.
That's what Ents did effectively.
Absolutely,
right? So,
yeah.
So, right, so the other move, and I think this actually happened around about the time of episode 70, but I think we just didn't have time to fit it in. And man alive, I'm certainly happy about this one. Dennis will be taking a break from NIP, and they'll be replacing him with Draken, who, of course, formerly was at NIP. Another one of these eclectic, inconsistent Swedish AWPers with big, bombastic personalities that NIP didn't like. Well, obviously, the relationship, and I believe the contract was all still connected, so they were able to just bring him back. And look, obviously we watched
what sort of fucked up in like incestuous scenario is that, where like NIP's kicked a player but hasn't been long enough yet that like his contract's fully ended or so? How did that work? The fuck? Because I know they did technically a trade right to fnatic or something bizarre like that. How did that work? It was something like that, right? For Lekko, think they traded him, am I remembering correctly? I think so.
Yeah, but I don't know if it was like a permanent move or a loan move or something.
Yes.
But regardless, anyway, I mean, even if the contract had expired or he wasn't still under the paperwork there, they were very quickly able to negotiate bringing him back and getting him in. And they're saying it's for a limited time only, potentially, unless it works.
Who's this guy, the fucking McRib? What are they talking about?
I know, right? It's wild as fuck, innit? I mean, look, it's got Makalele written all over it again. I know, for me, this move.
They've even brought him back like Makalele, which they obviously did as well, didn't they?
Yeah. Well, you remember when the NIP fucking Makalele went to the Star Ladder tournament that they won,
Yeah.
right? And it still wasn't enough. Winning a tournament with him wasn't enough to keep him in the lineup. And I think that
does make you wonder, even though, listen, he did his reflections with me, he claims he has no clue why he was caked. He doesn't understand it. No one's ever told me this day. Like, listen, brother, I don't want to hate on you, but you might want to reflect on what special kind of cunt you are. That even when they bring you back in the team, and they haven't won fuck all in ages, then they win a massive tournament, they still go, nah, get him out of here. Like, I'd maybe just reflect on that, There's something going on there. That's all I'm saying.
I will say that there comes a point probably where management have to kind of, and I think we're past that point. I think it has happened, but like there was a point where management had to say something to the core of the NIP side and be like, look, we all know what personalities you like to play with, but enough about you, eh?
Yes.
The organization has pretty much been in your thrall and in your shadow, even to the point where we had to keep fucking shitters like exist on the books for as long as possible because you all get along. Well, it can't be about that. At some point, we are going to have to explore new talent options. And interestingly enough, NIP went from being a team that famously had one of the oldest and most cohesive cores in the game. Now it's a fucking revolving door over there. If you're Swedish and you haven't played for NIP, I mean, like what are you doing with your time? So, and if you add fnatic and NIP into that right now, I think everyone in Sweden's had a go on the two organizations if you're even a vaguely competent player. So, and Red Reserve catch all the detritus, or they used to when they existed. So, Draken coming back for me, I mean, look, crucially, there is no way this can be a bad move because Dennis was absolutely fucking awful. He was at his career worst, his career low point. When this move came in, I'm pretty sure that's why they quickly bundled bringing Draken back, because it was like they didn't have a plan. They weren't expecting Dennis to be cut. They weren't expecting Dennis to have this absolute stinking major performance that he did, to the point where he's even tweeting during the major, just feels like I'm playing a different game. Like, I don't even understand CS anymore. And it's like, fucking hell. We can see that. Yeah. Well, we can fucking see it though. He has been woefully bad for a long, long time. And one decent series doesn't change just how much of a detriment he was to this team. Although fans will, of course, tell you otherwise. And I talked on a previous episode about the almost Stockholm syndrome of the NIP fans going, I really hope Dennis gets good again. It's like, he's 28. He occupied a very weird niche in time where he had like a breakout that was pretty late in his career, really. If we're talking about CSGO, where he had a lot of respect from his fellow pros, he had a lot of respect from his fellow teammates, and he was putting up big numbers. And it's all converged with him getting this opportunity to play on the old it was the fnatic lineup, where they actually were winning tournaments on the reg, and it looked like Dennis was suddenly a solution. Well, that's a long fucking time ago now. I almost want to say that's 2016, right? Like,
it was the beginning of 2016 they win all those tournaments. 3 years ago.
So it's like the motherfucker's 28, pushing 29. You probably
has a kid as well, as far as I know. I believe he has a family.
Yeah, you got to assume he's winding down the clock, and he's looked absolutely terrible. There was rumors circulating that NIP weren't getting in a lot of practice anyway. And any move for him, I would have cut Dennis for anyone, like any Swede. Like I don't even think that's hyperbole. I think I would struggle to think of a Swede I wouldn't give a go. Like I'd even be willing to bring guys like Freddie B and that back from the dead to give him a chance, like just anything, because it wasn't just one tournament. It was months and months and months of poor statistics, of not doing what he was supposed to do. And ever since Lecro had took over the IGL role, which was originally Dennis's role in the team when they brought him in, he was going to be like some sort of pseudo IGL, because that's how they do things over at NIP. It was clear that if he couldn't post the numbers, then what the fuck are we talking about? So, and also as well, the pistol player, Dennis, the one that would win you pistols, and best pistol player again. He
lost in
died.
shipping.
He died at fucking sea. Probably in 2016 as well. So look, I don't think this move's a bad move potentially. Whether or not NIP will be able to quickly assimilate and solve some of the problems that he had when Draken was in the lineup before, who knows? And it doesn't feel like a long-term move. I feel when you sign somebody, if you stipulate as you sign them, don't worry, guys, they're just a stand-in. You're pretty much saying, like, we're doing this out of desperation.
You've got to go God mode to overturn that, basically.
Yeah, and I don't
probably
think
win a bunch of tournaments and everything,
Yeah, and I don't think Draken has it in him. Honestly, I don't think Draken is that good. Unfortunately, there was a period of time where he looked like hot property. But again, let's be clear: Sweden hasn't produced a world-class AWPer ever, probably, like in CS:GO. Like even when an IP with a dominant force,
I don't think there's anyone.
Yeah, Rattlesnake got completely shit on for saying he didn't think they could sustain that success because they didn't have a top tier.
Like the closest is probably JW, and even then he was famously inconsistent anyway, and had an amazing fucking team round him, didn't he?
And that CZ nerf obliterated him. So yeah, crazy shit. But overall, I'll pick your brains. I mean, it's got to be a step in the right direction, hasn't it?
Yeah, I'd agree with you. Like, this is one of the very, very rare cases. In fact, this is the crazy thing about NIP over the last, like, sort of 6 months, is they've had a bunch of pretty decent results. Like, they've had a few times where they've looked good against Astralis. They've had a whole bunch of results where it's like, as a team, they've definitely improved. The last 6 to 9 months, they've gotten better and better. But that was despite the fact Dennis was terrible. And even worse, if you watch the game, it's not like he was doing some sort of, like, clever, intangible. No, he wasn't doing anything. He was just playing bad. Like, he legit had the chance to be a good player, and he just couldn't do it for some bizarre reason in his lineup. I don't get it either. He was such a good player when he was in Fnatic. I will say one aspect, just as a pure speculation, that I would have on him is it's very telling that he actually did basically himself admit that he was playing terribly. Because as I said, if you go back to when they had that first run at, I think it was either, I can't remember if it was the Face It Major or DreamHack Stockholm, was when I made that tweet where I said, like, basically if you replace Dennis here with Crims, like, how much better would Nip be? And he did sort of like a fucking sad face emoji or some shit on Twitter to imply like he disagreed or something. But if you know what this guy was like when he was in Fnatic, he was almost like the irrational self-confidence guy. Like, he was the guy where every interview, he'd always be like, I think we will win and we're just better than them, And that wasn't bravado. He really was a guy who thought that way. Well, I have to say, people like that, when their ego gets cracked, fucking hell, they just break apart completely. Because if you've built your whole self-identity on the idea that I'm the best or I'm better than all you guys, I'll always be the best, well, that's exactly it. You can't ever have a moment when you're not the best. And in fact, if you do, as you see here, you've lost your whole like center point, as it were. It's like, what do you do when you're not a player who's super skilled? What do you do when you're a player who can't win aim duels? Every instinct you have is wrong, basically. That's one of the reasons why I get infuriated by people who really do think you can just have like all skilled aimers and that they'll just figure out all the other roles. It's like part of what usually makes someone develop an amazing supportive style is that they didn't have the skill set to do the other aspect of the games. They had to put all their effort and practice into doing other stuff in the game to set someone up to be in good position, to always have the perfect utility usage, whatever it might be. So I think it's, again, on the NIP side of things, you don't lose anything by taking Dennis out. You're almost certainly going to get something from having Draken in there. I mean, gives you a different look. He's an AWPer, primary AWPer, so Forrest doesn't have to AWP right now. I can't really see how he could fuck it up. In fact, I could even see in the early going, you could, I mean, they had a couple of games here at Blast that weren't bad. I could even see it giving you a little boost, and maybe you can have a wild crack at winning a tournament. I do think it's also probably right from NIP to just set the expectations here. Like, it's not a full-time, we're not replacing him. We're definitely not committing to him. Because I think you also do, as I alluded to there, set the expectations for Drake. And it's kind of like, listen, we'll give you another crack at it, but you better be fucking amazing. And we probably have to like literally have some really deep runs. Otherwise, don't forget about it. Like, we're going to use you for now, but we're looking for someone more permanent. So I don't know where they go for someone more permanent. But again, you can't really fail when Dennis is a player you're replacing. As long as the person brings anything to the team, it's probably a good move.
Yeah, and just one of your personal favorites as well. When we talk about bullshit reasons to cut, for explaining why players have to leave, they actually said that he'd had energy fatigue due to the heavy schedule.
Wait a minute, mate. Like, can I just go ahead and say this, right? Listen, Ninjas in Pajamas CEO and PR stuff. I'm aware you come from Sweden. And in Sweden, most people work an office job. They probably have very reasonable hours. You have a fantastic welfare system in place. Now, my family and the people in my area in the Northeast used to go down a fucking mine for 14 hours a day. They would come out with their faces all blackened with soot. They would develop cancer. And after their dog shit life, after which they were down a mine for 14 hours a day and then drank all the money away and beat their wives, at the end they would die very young, probably about 50 or so, at which point in time, luckily, there'd been a little replacement they'd popped out to take that empty spot down the mine. Now, those people didn't come out the mine, Richard, on a Friday and go, tell you what, I've got that fucking energy fatigue, haven't I? Because they had to go down that fucking mine. They're playing video games. There's no, what is this energy? It's the way that's not even a real thing, energy fatigue. Well, is he physically exhausted? Well, no, it's not exactly. All right, some sort of psychological problems. Nah, his energy level. Who are you, fucking Vegeta, with that thing out of the beginning of Dragon Ball Z or something? How are you tracking this cunt's energy? His energy is under 9.5. Fuck off. That is the wackest excuse I've ever heard. Unless that means someone in the Nip Org was ragging this guy's dick off. Where's this energy fatigue coming from? What sort of mad cover-up is this?
What I just don't understand is why can't orgs just say, yeah, the player was shit, so
he underperformed,
Yeah,
it wasn't working for either of us. We wish him well elsewhere. Because that's the other thing, as well, I said like before, Richard.
Yeah.
I could imagine him going to another team and turning it around. Why not?
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe heroic. You want to play, mate? There needs to be some sort of fucked up like meme like that, like where it's like Freiburg around the corner when you're leaving the team. It's like, psst, you want to play an heroic, son? It's like,
like Pennywise under the sewer. Like.
Yeah, come down here. Hey, Dennis, we're all starters down here.
Oh God. But anyway, I just thought that tickled me because it is, as you rightly said, one of the worst excuses I've ever heard.
Because it's an imaginary concept as well, isn't it? Energy fatigue.
Yeah, but like they're saying
get out the fucking Dexter. What were those pills? What were those tablets called?
Dexedrine.
Yeah, there we go. Where you just bang those for a cheeky bit of energy.
You sure do.
Also, I probably wouldn't go around saying that you play on energy fatigue when you're sponsored by that like fucking no-core company or whatever. That's literally an energy drink company, you daft cunts.
Well, I mean, it's the way that in
then again, though, what? To be fair, what am I expecting? What he's just gonna be strapped up on no-core like that fucking what's his name, Blanca in that Street Fighter movie again. Why am I going with the 1993 references again? Right, whatever.
Into the game again. That's
right. There we go. It's a modern reference. There you go.
You've done it, Duncan.
There we go.
Back in the modern times. But no, they labour the point in the statement. They say Dennis is experiencing energy fatigue due to heavy scheduling over the last period of time. In order to prevent this from escalating, we've agreed for Dennis to take some time off to recover before returning to competitive play. The upcoming schedule for the CS team is heavy, and we do not want to take any risks with regards to our players' health. Dennis will undergo further medical examination in the upcoming days. It's like, guys, like we all know you're cutting him because he's shit. Like
I know.
You don't need to go deep on this lie. It all sounds very professional. It all sounds like respectable almost. Like, and I'm yeah, great. I wish more organizations did care about player health, but none of that is what's happening here. He's just shit. He's just a bad player right now. That's it. So yeah, just a bit bizarre that they fucking really oversold it like that. But all the best to Draken. And as I said, I don't see how the move can't work out for them. The other news, you remember, I think when Gambit brought Blade in, everyone was excited,
yes.
like, this great coach, this guy who implemented the famously boring but relentlessly effective flip side system where you play all the rounds, every second of every round. He's going to get to work with some real players now, some talented players. So a lot of people, I think myself included, I know you were excited at the prospect of the Blade era of Gambit. He came in July 2018, and pretty much since then, I mean, to be fair, you could argue he was sort of misrepresented what the project would be, because they've got rid of pretty much any player that
they did immediately put Hobbit and Adren on the transfer market about exactly the time they signed him.
Yeah. But they've, I mean, like, this has got to be winding down on Gambit now. They've announced that Blade is leaving, and Bondic is also been released after a very short period of time within Gambit. Bondic's just sort of become some mad journeyman now, like literally like some fucking, one of those old footballers that just keep going.
I mean, at this point, he's just the last flip-sider, isn't he? It's like Simple was only in the team, for a period of time. I don't really count him as a proper flip-side player. Bondic's the last one that's still around, mate. Yeah. Marklov, Rosie, Blade, gone. Shara tragically died in the middle of that ESL1 clone stage.
Yeah, where he just got swallowed up.
He's just, I think he's still down there. He's sort of like the fucking Minotaur of that, like, labyrinth type area.
No, it was that. It was the sequel to that fucking Sam Raimi film, wasn't it? Like, Drag Me to Hell or whatever the fuck it was called. He's just suffering eternal damnation. Couldn't be happier for him. But yeah, the Bondic pickup was notably awful. I mean, Bondic in this lineup, whenever I watched Gambit play, I mean, he just looked poor. And looked like a player who had been slumming it in China for a little bit and not really playing up to the standards he used to. And I'm kind of hoping, because remember, I know I bring it up every time we talk about him. Gambit did say they were getting rid of the CSGO team and phasing shit out.
Yes.
And their lineup now, I mean, for starters, they don't have 5, right? And now it is Dozier, the inexplicably pronounced Mo, even though it's clearly Moo, but it's Mo. They got Mir, and they got, a player called Exile. So there's recognizable names there, but it's really light on talent. And again, Mir is somebody I feel immensely sorry for, because it looked like he was getting his big move and he broke away from the Vegas Squadron core and said, look, guys, we're all going to get called up to the big time. Don't worry, I'll send you a postcard from the Russian equivalent of Hollywood. And off he went. And it turns out it was just garbage. He's getting reamed out on some fucking casting couch. So,
well, actually, that's also another aspect that's very suspicious about this team. Because remember, some of the other Vegas Squadron players left, but apparently they're going like Team Spirit or whatever the fuck it was, wasn't it? Like these players don't even percolate out to Gambit now, which does make it sound like they're not in the market for half of them.
So, what do you think's going on then? And what do you think of Blade being back on the market? Are we likely to see him anywhere?
I have to figure someone will pick him up as a coach. Like, the funny thing is as well, like, I can't say I've ever spoken to him in person, but I know this was a guy who's actually written English even over a decade ago, was half decent. He was pretty good. Like, he's a pretty intelligent guy. So I even figure he could be a coach of a non-CIS team if he indeed wants to. I'm sure it's not as great as being able to speak in Russian to your teammates, but to be fair, if you're the coach and you're not in the game anyway, you have the time to explain things, you have the time to break things down and make sure you've got it all nailed down. So I think you could definitely continue as a coach. The question is if other people will actually sort of rate him as highly. I would hope so, because if you just look at all those times he got flipside into those majors, the guy's got a pretty good track record because he hasn't worked with that much talent in CSGO. In terms of Gambit, I'm with you. I don't get the concept. Like, as soon as they listed their 2 best players as being on the transfer market and then implied they were going to close down, I never would have expected they would then keep signing new players to the team. That seems like you don't really want to do what you initially stated. Plus, if you look at the course that they took with their League of Legends team, where they basically just eventually faced the facts that they weren't going to have a top team and that they couldn't fund it, and just made a team in the Russian league. And so they have a team there now. I would have expected that would be the approach you could take. Like, right, we'll pick up the equivalent of whatever the fuck the Team Spirit roster is, and we'll just try and win the CIS minor, and that's how we get to the majors. Or we'll just play Star Ladders because they'll invite us. That might be like, if you wanted to go kind of like a min-max dollar for dollar approach on like the minimum you could spend while still getting some decent, rep within your region, then still having a chance at the odd major. That's probably the right approach. Because at the moment, if I'm players like Mo, like Mir, why are you sticking around on this team? Surely there are opportunities elsewhere. Because this team, if anything, surely will just gradually go further and further downhill. I can't see how they ever replenish the players at this point.
Well, here's a question as well. Obviously, my history around this time is a little bit fuzzy, but I remember that there was a team called Kirchnet
Yes.
in Ukraine, the core of which were picked up in 2009 and went to Navi, and then that was Star X and
I think Zeus and Senya. I think that might have been the three.
Yeah. And then anyway, after that, Blade was kind of their like replacement, to build that new roster. So he didn't play on that team with them, but I think he came in after. So I don't know if the Navi guys have like a relationship there, because he's a similar age. He was always in the other teams like DTS and Kirchnet and the teams around that time.
Well, actually, Starix was a player under Blade when they were in a team years and years before. So there is some connection there. By the way, I can kind of see where you're going with this. If I was Navi, I'd absolutely give this guy a try. I mean, here's the thing. You've already taken Zeus's system as far as you can. It's still pretty good. I mean, still win a lot of fucking games. You've got amazing players. Simple's obviously played under Blade when he was in Flipside. I'm sure now, with a little bit of maturity, you could probably see that there's a guy who knows what the fuck he's talking about. The big problem is, Richard, as you'd fully expect, for whatever reason, this fucking Kane guy's just never getting kicked out of that team, is he? Like, I don't know why, but he's just one of these untouchable people, isn't he?
After that video circulated around with Kane and Zeus arguing, pretty boisterously, I would say. And Simple kind of sat there like going, we always end up here. Like, it just keeps happening.
The voice of reason, for fuck's sake.
Yeah, I know. When Simple's the fucking person that's trying to cool down the situation, like, what's the world coming to? But, at what point look, I'll tell you something about Zeus. He's a selfish, ruthless little cunt. He doesn't give a fuck about anything except making that paper. He straight doesn't give a fuck. And that's why he's anchored himself to basically the prospects of, well, first of all, he anchored himself to a yes man in the form of Edward. And now he's anchored himself to the best fucking player in the world. So now he can't, he can't go anywhere. So if he needs to sacrifice Kane to get himself an extra life, an extra year of being on the team, mate, he'll fucking wreck Kane. He'll throw him under one of his fucking sports cars and back over his fucking head. So maybe there is a prospect there that Zeus says, oh yeah, we have been bad. I agree. And it was all the coach's fault. And then out goes the big red machine, and in comes Blade.
There is a part when you say it like that does make it seem very cynical, that he keeps around a coach that we're not really sure what he does. Keeps around Edward, who is just blatantly going to be the scapegoat for all the shit stuff in the game. That it is just sort of that principle in it of like, if you're an African tribesman, you don't have to be able to outrun a lion. You just have to be able to outrun the guy next to you. It is sort of that principle, and he's just got a guy with like a limp next to him. He's like, well, every man for themselves, and he's like tripping him up as well.
Oh yeah, it reminds me of that mad cunt in in that Titanic. Well, obviously you've seen Titanic, right? I'm guessing. Yeah, you caught it at the time.
I've seen part of it.
Oh, you never watched the whole thing?
I wasn't that into that movie, to be fair.
Yeah, well, not me either, but I caught it on a plane back.
I mean, maybe this will be something one day we'll discuss on a future podcast project, but I actually think that is one of the movies that symbolizes James Cameron's absolute selling out as a fucking artist with integrity.
Oh, for sure.
Before that, I thought he was a fucking legend, but after that,
not
fuck
so
off.
much.
Especially when he was like, oh, and I'm also going to do all these sequels to Avatar. Fuck you.
Yeah, well, I won't get started on Avatar. But anyway, there was a guy in that movie, right, who basically, when they're doling out all the fucking lifeboats, he pulls his gun out and starts going, I'm getting in one of them fucking lifeboats, you mad cunt. That is Zeus. Like that is. Zeus.
I think it was the Billy Zane character, wasn't it? Wasn't it Billy Zane who played that character?
No, Billy Zane was the main love rival. because he was like Kate Winslet's fucking...
Right.
What they done was, basically, right, they took a guy, used his real name. There was a famous court case about
Oh,
it.
right. Okay.
And they depicted him as having gone mad and wielded a gun and tried to force himself into the lifeboats in the movie. But in reality, he sacrificed his life to save as many people as possible. And his family were like, fucking hell. And yeah, like, you can't just do that.
That
you
is
actually
pretty
used
mad.
his real name. So I think they had a settlement out of court.
I will
about
say,
it.
though, I do remember there was a classic meme a couple of years ago on the internet where it was that frame you're talking about from Titanic where the guy's like trying to get on a lifeboat.
Yeah.
And it says like, it said, you know, like 1905 is, or whatever year that fucking shit was, is like what they would have said to you back then was like, sorry, sir, this is for women and children only. And then it was like, you know, 2016. And he was like, did you just assume my gender? Which is like, whoever thought that one up, that was fucking well executed.
But yeah, so Zeus, like the basically the way that Blade gets into Navi as a coach is if Zeus deems that his position is under threat. Like if for any reason the management of Navi, you know, decide like, oh, we're actually giving serious consideration to cutting Zeus, I'm pretty sure he'll like tell everybody how ineffective Kane is. And how bad he is, you know, and like and oh, it was all his fault, all of those terrible things, you know, that were going on. So it's just the nature of the beast. But yeah, I mean, the other thing that I thought was funny about this, again, too much information. Bondic was like saying, I did have an offer of a long-term contract, but we couldn't agree on a salary, so I refused to sign.
Yeah, the
And
problem was he wanted one, and
yeah, exactly. Yeah, he actually wanted a fucking But I mean, like, think about it. If you're Bondic, right, and you're getting paid anything, you're doing all right, mate. Like, come on, grow up. But yeah, apparently,
obviously, I'm just waiting to see when Gambit announces Peacemaker as the new coach.
give it time, mate. That's the inevitable nail in the coffin.
Mate,
Right.
at this point in time, I actually feel like, you remember that old Vice documentary they made, which apparently half of it was at least bullshit, like all Vice documentaries, where they were going on about that fucking powder in like Brazil or something, like when they give you it, it like makes you crazy and you're just suggestible. And this is where, Richard, like I already had my journalist like spider sense tingling, where there was all these fucking reamed out Americans like, I couldn't say no. I had to just take all the money out of my account and give it to him. It's like, this already sounds like you're just covering for a really dodgy sort of like stripper type prostitute scenario that you don't want to admit to. Like, I couldn't control myself. Meanwhile, like what the CIA doesn't have access to this shit. Just it was called like scopolamine or something, if you remember. It's called like the devil's.
Scopolamine, yeah. I've seen it. Yeah.
And the whole thing was, right, I thought that was like a bullshit story. Again, because as I said, this thing exists and everyone's just using that all the time. Get the fuck out of my face. But after seeing Peacemaker's career, I feel like, you know, like I said, Brazil, he's coming from, there might be some truth to it. Maybe that's what he does. He comes in and he goes, listen, the guy said, before we start, I don't know if you mind, but I'm a very spiritual person, so I like to just wave this incense. And then he waves it around the room. He goes, breathe deeply, you know, get us all in the mood. And then they all go, bloody hell, I feel like I like this guy. And then he goes, gives this whole presentation. At the end, they go, he's the guy for me. Yeah, sign him up. And then what's great is they do the same excuse themselves. I bloody couldn't control myself. I just had to give him a contract with all the perks and a 1-year deal with a golden handshake after 2 months if for some reason he leaves the team. Don't know why he always asks for that clause, because I don't ever plan on kicking him 1.5 months in. Like, how much is it going to be? Yeah, it's fucking pay him. Just pay him, get out. I'd love to know how much this guy's made just from being fired from teams. He's got the best scamming of all time, hasn't he?
Oh, yeah, no doubt, like, no doubt. Look, so while we're talking about long, lingering drama, I guess it's time to dig into the Cloud9 shit.
Here we go.
Yeah, man alive.
Is this like musical fucking chairs, this lineup? What's going on?
I don't get it. I mean, put it this way. I understand Flusher taking some time off after his mother passed away and everything else. Like, totally get that. Sure. That makes sense. I mean, I don't even know if that was what happened or whether he was always going to leave at that time. But certainly, you know, while you're talking about energy fatigue and all of this nonsense, if there's a good reason to spend some time out with the game and get your head right, it's a bereavement. But then there was reports circulating. And this is what I mean. Like, you just know immediately that Cloud9 are desperately looking for options. They're just desperately looking for options. They legit don't have a plan, because there was a report going around. It was published over at dust2.dk. I got no reason to doubt it, about how they were looking at Config and Yugi from Optic, which, by the way, one half of that is a great move. The other half, not so much, which kind of reeks of maybe they had to do a double deal or something. Kind of reminiscent of what happened with Navi. It's like, well, we'll tell you simple.
That makes it sound like for some reason Config said, yeah, this guy has to come with me.
Yeah, possibly, because again, I mean, maybe he is thinking of the Smooyer effect and being, I need some cunt who speaks fucking Danish in the team, and I'll get on the best with Yugi, so Yugi's coming, So that symbol that maybe there was something going on at Optic, we'll talk about that in a moment. But then what happened was, it doesn't look like that move's happening at all now, because Cloud9 have instead gone the other way and picked up an American player on trial, of course, in the form of Vice. And that happened because Rogue has fell apart, which we'll also talk about in a second. So this says to me that it was like, fucking hell, we'll get some Europeans. We know Optic, don't we? Jack's like, yeah, I got Hector's mobile number. Come on, man. You know those Danes are shit and not good enough for you. You're going to cut and wilt it, two of them off your hands, and we'll see what we can do. And Hector goes, oh, yeah, thanks, Jack. I always thought you were a fucking, one of those cartel running people, but you're doing all right, actually. That's really going to help me out. We'll all do a deal. And then it's just like, what? There's some fucking journeyman North American available. Fucking get me Rogue's owner on the phone right now. Fuck you, Hector. And now Vice is on the team, which, now listen, there's a component here of automatic has almost become like the Stewie 2K now. Like, it was Stewie 2K brought him into the team. Yes. It was a great move. They knew each other from previous lineups. They played together. And then now Automatic is the star player on the team, the AWPer, and I'm pretty sure he's had a word with the management here, because obviously they did play together on that TSM lineup, and they know each other. But,
and I believe he actually even said in one of an interview I did, I think he implied he thought he was a good player as well.
Yeah. So just crazy. Like, how you go from winning a major with long tenured players to, as you said, musical chairs, and this, where just everyone is getting a go on Cloud9. Like the Zelzis project, they didn't really commit to that. Reminiscent of the FNS debacle. They're not even giving people time to find their groove. Golden was in and out of the team. Flusher was a temporary standing in-game leader. He's not on the lineup anymore. They're being linked with these Danes from Optic, which doesn't even make any sense within the context of, like, language. But I suppose, okay, Config's a star player, and technically they, maybe they could use an AWPer, and Automatic could go to rifles, but it's not necessary. Like, Tim's killing it on the AWP right now. And then you pick up Vice, who, by the way, Vice has been touted as a breakout star in NA for years, and it's never happened. It's never happened in a scene that has so many organizations that actually, just by virtue of existing and them having all these leagues, you're more likely to say break out of the pack in NA than you are in Europe. So I don't know what the fuss is with this, but bringing him in, again, it looks like history's repeated itself, and this is about placating a star player rather than thinking about what's good for the team. Because there's no doubt in my mind, if you give me Config or give me Vice,
of course,
I'm taking the Dane every fucking time. So what is going on over at Cloud9, and what do you think of all of these roster moves?
Well, that's actually also the part that fucking sucks, is you hear all these different potential moves. This is the worst one, and this is the one that's happened. Now, admittedly, the whole trial component does obviously, again, like with the Drake helmet, you are just advertising like this isn't for certain. So listen, if you're out there and you're a free agent, keep your eye out. Might be calling you. Because if you think about all the options that were potential, okay, so we heard Sonny linked with them. Would love that move. Great timing for Cloud9 as well. He's been sort of on a slump individually. The whole mouse sports thing apparently didn't want to stay there. So that would have been very shrewd timing, I think, to have picked someone like that. I could easily see him coming back in a form this year and you'd look like a genius. Likewise, the config angle. Sure, if you have to bring Yugi as well, that's a little bit more of a concession. But I think config's good enough. And especially, again, if you're a team like Cloud9, it's very rare you're going to get a European player of the level of config who potentially has many years ahead of him, where he might come to your team and become one of the best players in the entire world. That also would be a great signing. You look elsewhere, it just does feel like, I'm not sure what they did in this offseason, but for being linked with so many players, how did they end up with none of them? I mean, think of some of the other players that at one point were available. Chris J could have been available at one point in time. Smooya obviously could have been available. Said he wanted to go to NA even. There was a lot of names out there, and they've ended up with, like you say, a fairly underwhelming one. Because this is someone where I agree with the way you characterized it. Like, it's one thing I always say this, it's one thing if one or two teams doesn't want to take a chance on someone or they tried someone and it didn't work out. But this is the equivalent of, like, if you think how many years it's been now that Vice has been around, we're talking like at least 3 years. So in 3 years, none of like 10 teams really wanted him, or if they had him, ever made use of him beyond that. Like, it's like the Scream factor in France. It doesn't matter what you guys think of him. It's clear at this point, no one else wants to play with this guy. And there's a good reason for that usually. Either they're such an arsehole outside of the game that you can't know it as a fan, but they just are intolerable in the game. Or even in the game, there's problems where, like, I mean, a classic example, I don't know if I would probably say personally it applies to Scream, is there's some players who look good in the game to the observer, but their comms are pure shit. And the teammates are like, I can't fucking play with that guy. Even if he kills 2 people, I get shot in the back by the next guy that he didn't comm on. So there's so many reasons behind the scenes as to why these players tend not to make it. I'm not really buying that he's going to break out in this team and become really good. So you look at the rest of the roster they've got, you're back to a lineup of like just hopes. Because you look at the rest of the team, Golden's had all these problems recently. We don't even know if he's 100% going to be back. Obviously, didn't yet get a real chance to do anything with this lineup. The only real players in this team that have played well is Automatic and Kiyashima. That's it. So Vice is already coming in with a lot to prove. Rush has been pretty dire. It's not really that good a team. Like, on paper, it's an okay lineup. But if I have to look, isn't they going to become top 2 in NA? And as it stands right now, I wouldn't pick this team to become a top 10 team in the world. They look like they're going to be firmly in tier 2.
Yeah, I mean, and like you say, when all of the names that were going around were being linked to Cloud9, I mean, this is clearly an acquisition of opportunity because of what happened with Rogue. It's not that Vice was ever on a target list. And it's like, how do you go from having a major winning team, from making like power trades and purchases from the likes of Optic and other rivals, and assembling a team that's good enough to win a major, to then dismantling that team, selling all of the talent off it, bar pretty much Automatic, because Rush is in a big slump, although I'm inclined not to blame him for it. And now you're reduced to taking, like Rogue's leftovers. Like, you're not even committing to the idea of paying more money to get config. And it's like, I'll have to get Jack on one of the fucking shows I do and have it out with him, because he always says, like, it's CS is in our DNA. Don't worry, we're gonna, like, what you're doing right now is so antithetical to what Cloud9 is, because it's you're not even developing young talent on a budget like you had to do back in the day before you had all this VC investment. There's headlines every week that some other fucking venture capitalist sugar daddy is coming into Cloud9. Alexis Ohani and that piece of shit from fucking Reddit is bragging about being a co-owner of Cloud9 when I'm amazed he even knows what the fuck it is, right? So there's money there. And if there's money there, what the fans want, and honestly, what you're almost obligated to a certain degree to do as a major winning team is to pump a little bit of that money. That you're probably getting it from, venture capital groups who maybe are more interested in the Overwatch League than Counter-Strike, or maybe are more interested in your League of Legends team than Counter-Strike. But how you spend money in your org is the buck stops with you, and you're not doing it. And like clearly, like this Vice is a free transfer as well because Rogue cut everybody loose. So I don't
What's
know
brutal as well
what
is
they're doing.
like, sure, the whole Flusher angle. There's extenuating circumstances you can't afford to happen there, and you can't anticipate. But that's what's so brutal is because when they at least had that lineup, when you have automatic Flusher and Kiyashima, fucking hell, that's not a bad little starting place. You know, at that point in time, we're just looking to find the right piece here, the right piece there. Now, after he's gone again. You are back. Like at the moment, if you look at the lineup they've currently got now, why am I going to join that team if I'm a good player? I'll only join it if I'm in a weird position like config. Like maybe you offer me a 6 salary and Optic wasn't that great anyway. Like maybe I would join it if it was Sonny, but even then it sounds like he's gotten better offers elsewhere. So it's like, I can't really see how you think this is an attractive place to go. And then you add in the days of Cloud9 being a spot you had to go if you're an NA player. Those are long gone. Those are long gone. There's now 2 teams are better than you. And in theory, can offer just as much money and they have better players to attract. And in fact, I'd say nowadays, complexity is complexity. Who else? Rogue would have been one of them. These are the teams that now Cloud9 has to compete with for players. So they're in a tough spot right now. They have to turn it around big time.
And it gets worse because DK had also reported that Kiyashima might not be a long-term player,
sure,
you know, for them. I think it was last week.
Yeah, he did a tweet as well that was kind of suspicious along those lines, right? Where he tweeted a bunch of flags.
Yeah. So it's like, and listen, Kiyashima sees the opportunity with both hands. Like he's had a very good run. He's proven himself to be a competent player, was arguably the best player on that lineup.
Sure.
And, you know, while because of politics, there might be no way back for him domestically in France. He's one of these people who clearly speaks good enough English and clearly can handle living abroad and all the other things that so many players seem to have issues with, that he can play on an international lineup. But you know what? I think with all of these terrible French players, I think this might be the road to redemption for Kiyashima.
I would agree, yeah. If I was either of those teams, I'd at least consider it.
Oh, if you're G2 right now, you've got to be thinking about it. You've got to be thinking about it. And fuck the politics, right? We'll get to G2 in a sec. But I mean, look, if Cloud9 lose Kiyashima, like, I mean, holy
That's basically it.
Yeah, well, holy G. Yeah, but what kind of lineup is it at that point? So really, really strange what's going on over there. I mean, maybe it's all part of some master plan and there are big moves on the horizon and Jack's doing this because we just need to make moves so we can meet our commitments to leagues and stuff and tournaments. But that doesn't necessarily ring true because they might have fucked themselves over for their major spot.
Yes, exactly. No, that's one of the problems I have with this move is that, I mean, I won't go into too many details, but I've told this on a number of occasions to Jack himself, which is the strategy you need to take with your CSGO team is basically like American sports franchises do, where you have to be thinking long term. So what you do is you think to yourself, and I'll give you an example. Obviously, I didn't give this example because it wasn't at the same time, but my example would be this. Team Liquid has all the star talent, don't they? They have Naf, and they have Elige, and they have Twist, and they have Stewie, right? What are the odds all of those players will be in Team Liquid for the next 3 years? They're not actually that high if you look at how teams turn over players. Odds are 1 or 2 of those players are going to be on the outs, whether it's for like individual reasons or not. Maybe they're still good players and there's just a dispute or one of them wants to go elsewhere. What you have to do is think of that now and you make your short list of players you would want on your team, kind of like players you'd build a franchise around. And what you do is, the way I tried to sell it to him was, mate, you're having to operate within League of Legends with all these restrictions and you can't talk to the player. What's great is we have no poaching rules in CS. Like you can go to a player right now in Team Liquid and say, listen, you're not going to get in trouble for this. There's nothing against it. There's no rule against it. When does your contract end? That's all I want to know. I'm not going to come and like try and interfere in Team Liquid or whatever. I just want to know, does your contract end in 6 months? Does it end in a year? And then what you do is you start building a package for one of those players. And what you do is 2 months out from that, you say to him, listen, if you were to be interested in joining Cloud9, I would have these sorts of players available. Or maybe you can pick a player who comes with, you make an attractive package for them because that's how you're going to get the talent in that then helps you get the other the talent that brings the results that then gets everything. Like, it's all a thing you've got to build piece by piece. Whereas at the moment, if I have to look at all the moves Cloud9's done over the last year or so, aside from when they gambled on FNS and then quickly pulled the plug on that, which, by the way, I will go ahead and say, I wouldn't have done that move, bearing in mind good old Tarek left your fucking team anyway. But okay, you've got to make your own decisions when it comes to hitching your ship to specific players. If the last like sort of 9 months worth of moves that they've done look like each time they just were painted into a corner and they were like, what's the one move I could do now that's like decent? Right, what Kiyashima hasn't played? Oh, get him. Flash is getting kicked by fnatic. Yeah, I'll try him. These don't look like premeditated moves. These just look like snap calls in the moment. And some of them were good, but you know, that's not how you build a team for my money. Like here's the thing, as much as people might meme on North, I kind of do admire that they're trying to take that kind of an approach. You know, they're trying to make it like you make everything as professional as possible. We're going to add pieces that make sense to us. We're going to filter out the pieces. They haven't succeeded yet, but I do think it is a better approach from the general manager perspective, because obviously,
no doubt about that.
Players are going to think differently. They have to think short term. I get it, but if you're the org owner, I think you've got to have a big, kind of a wider perspective on your team.
So that all kind of kickstarted some strange shit, like just weird shit going on. That pretty much led to Rogue doing the classic NA team owner. We're pulling out of CSGO, but we'll be back. Like what? So I mean,
then why?
Yeah. Why are you making an announcement about this? I'll read part of that.
I've got a. Thing is, at Rogue, we're experiencing a lot of energy fatigue. The schedule exists, and we're going to have to take a few months off, but we'll definitely be back and see.
It's just so silly. But anyway, what happened was, with the rumors about Optic maybe jetting
all over their fucking hopes and dreams.
But anyway, getting rid of fucking 2 players, they suddenly were back in the frame to get MSL and Nico, right? And then so it's like, okay, well, Rogue. I mean, it's MSL's bag, right? I mean, you know, he was the high-profile in-game leader that came in. A lot of people were like, "Holy shit!" You know, MSL's slumming it out there. Well, now with that, just the rumor of that move apparently caused Rogue enough to be like, "Oh, fuck this! What? Our players just aren't like working on some indentured servitude basis and can join other teams." Seems like a lot of work to keep up with this. You know, when players are leaving and stuff. So fuck that. We're out. We're done. And now, as a result of that, this is why you have the Vice move to Cloud9. The other one was Sick joining Complexity. It's bizarre, actually, because the move that was sort of started the whole collapse of Rogue hasn't happened yet, hasn't been announced. And if Cloud9 don't take those Danish players, do Optic make a roster move together? Now, we'll just talk briefly about Optic. Oh, God, if they get MSL instead of Snappy, like, Optic fans can feel good again. Like, because Snappy being cut is long overdue, guys. I'm sorry. What has this Optic team done? They're probably on a par with Heroic in terms of output and what they're doing. It's just not suitable for a brand of Optic size. MSL's a clear upgrade as an IGL. I don't know too much about the Nico move or where he'd fit in. Never been a player that's really stood out for me, but you know, MSL's obviously a fan, so whatever. He'll have his man in there that he gets to work with immediately on the ground floor. It's always good for an IGL to have that.
Sure.
When you're implementing a new system. Because you have a go-to guy who you know what their level are in the positions that you want to use them. So, look, I mean, that'd be great. But the madness is that Rogue have completely shut up shop, started like just letting players go, and the MSL move hasn't happened yet. So I don't know what to make of that. I don't know if that means it's definitely going to happen, or maybe Rogue have fucking just like, you know, shot their bolt way too fucking quick here. Like who knows? Because it was a good week for them. They just qualified for the ECS Season 7 finals. They're off to China.
Yeah, for Starladder.
For Starladder. So I mean, like, to shut up shop like this, like, it is wild. Yes. And the person it obviously fucks the most is Hiko, because I don't know where he goes after this. I don't know if there's anyone in NA that'd be willing to play with him. I kind of feel he's going to be in that situation now where if he does want to keep playing, he's going to have to just play with like young players, kind of like in the same purgatory Steel is in, but for different reasons, obviously. So yeah, like what a mad fucking situation this whole mess is over at Rogue.
Yeah, I agree, because obviously the stupidest part of it is you basically fucked two teams over with a mad musical chairs scenario where the music just stopped and they had no fucking chairs left. So
Yeah.
it does seem bizarre. The MSL to Optic move's an interesting one, because what I like about the Optic experiment is it's broken all the people who used to try to tell me I overrated MSL and that, because classically they used to try and use Snappy as the sort of cudgel to beat me. Like, well, if I think fucking Snappy would be sick with that team. Snappy then, of course, got basically like arguably as good a roster of, funnily enough, ex-North players as MSL had, and did sweet fuck all with it, quite frankly. Nothing really of any relevance. So I think MSL going back in there, that's where if Snappy didn't do a good job, I think you'll really see it, because first of all, there's still some decent pieces in that team. Then you got to look at the fact that, you know what, I'm sure Config and Cajun B have their own reasons to not be massive fans of MSL, but hey, what? I bet they fucking welcome him back with open arms now. It's like, all that needs to be said is the thing I repeated on a show recently, which is when I had Valde on Counterpoints, and I asked him,
great episode that was, by the way.
What do you think of the fact that, you used to play with MSL and obviously everyone flamed him and then he got caught? And he basically just said, like, yeah, I didn't understand when I played with MSL that we had a system. It's only once he left, I realized, like, fuck, that was a system. There was a plan at all points in time. There was a coherent approach. So it's like, whether you agree or not, the guy does know how to run teams that way. It's like all those sorts of in-game leaders like that, DAPS, FNS, MSL, these sorts of people, you can certainly say they're not fit for the top tier if you want, or that they should never be in charge of like a team that has championship aspirations. But what you cannot deny is the basics of an in-game leader job. They can really fucking check all the boxes. So if you are a team where you're not at a top level, they're a pretty good gamble to take. Like, once you've got that piece in mind, then you don't have to worry about that piece anymore. Now you look for your stars and your young players and the rest of it. And it's like you're going to have to wait quite a long time and get everything else in line before you ever have to worry about cutting that guy and replacing. It's a solid enough move. I do think that it's kind of a bit weird that, I mean, the implication here is, like, again, it's one of those ones where it's like, how can the morale of the team, if you put them back together when people basically left the team, how the fuck do you fix that scenario? That's a tough one in my book.
So the other move that came off the back of that, which I mentioned, was Sick going to Complexity. He comes in for nothing. A bit of a strange one as well, because it looks like another opportunistic acquisition. Nothing actually said that he'd been offered a contract for long term, and that doesn't surprise me at all with Complexity. They do like to have consistency and coherence in their lineups, and if anything, they have a tendency to stand by players when it's not really justified. And Jordan, I think he did well at Complexity, but not well enough that I would be like, there's not room to improve the squad and maybe look at some other options and some younger options. I think actually a lot of people low key in the community basically think that Sick was the best option to get out of that Rogue shuffle. He's the youngest. He's the guy that, again, a lot of people have been talking about him maybe having a breakthrough. The difference is he's not 24. He's 20. So you have got that time. And slotting in for nothing, I think definitely he can do a good job. But I did think it was strange how Jordan said that he'd been offered a long-term contract and it was some other prior commitments he'd agreed to that meant that he wouldn't be able to do that. Now, I know Jordan's been working on his stream and a lot of like public appearances and like endorsements. He's getting into that, influencer life. And that's fine. Total respect for him doing it. He definitely did his time in CS. But obviously you can't play on a top tier team and have that shit in the background. I mean, if Shroud couldn't do it, best will in the world, Jordan definitely can't. So I think this is a good move for Complexity overall. I think Sick is a player with some potential. Still not happy about Ricky being on the lineup, but slowly and surely Complexity are starting to look more and more like a team that could have kind of a breakout in 2019 for me.
Sure. I think this is a decent gamble. If you look at the players out there, again, like the good thing about the team they have now is like they actually have like a decent amount of consistency in terms of the players and what roles they're going to play. I think there's a logic to that. A lot of it is still going to massively rest on Stanislaw, though, because even in this team, he has to frag quite a lot. So I do think it's still tough for them to take a crack at the NRGs and Team Liquids of the world who are above them. But, I mean, I could argue they're in equally as good a position as Cloud9, so it's not terrible. The big thing for me is, unlike the other teams, Complexity isn't yet at the position where for some reason they seem to be able to get the big free agents. So I do think they're still somewhat working with a tough spot in that one. So I don't really know what other options they would have had. Like, you notice their name wasn't linked with all these other big free agents out there, even though, you know, in theory, they probably should have the money. It's just that will always be a factor with players, is unless you're at like your last chance saloon scenario, a lot of what decides whether players want to join a team is the other players in the team. So I have to say at the moment, Complexity doesn't have kind of the big star that will attract you in yet.
Yeah, I think I'm inclined to agree with that assessment, but we'll wait and see. I still feel that like the move for Complexity is big name player for Ricky. Now we're talking, but we'll have to wait and see how that pans out. Then. Finally, and then we'll wrap up we'll move to the patron questions. This just came through today, so technically shouldn't talk about it, but I think this is worth bringing up. Major has finally called time on his tenure as the ex-Space Soldiers in-game leader. It was only a matter of time after Xantares went. There's a lot of rumors behind the scene, by the way, that Xantares shooting out on his own apparently fucked the team up in the sense that nobody wanted to sign the team without Xantares. And I have to be honest, while I think that's disrespectful to all the other players like Calix and Paz, who put in like good shifts and did, you know, solid work for the team, and obviously Major himself, the reality is there was a time when, you know, org owners were coming to me and saying, could you recommend some CS teams on the market if we wanted to get in the Counter-Strike? And I'm like, listen, for you, an entry-level team here is probably Space Soldiers. I know it's not a huge region in terms of, you know, marketing, but they got an unbelievably, like, mad dedicated fan base. And the kicker is you get yourself a prime piece of talent you can flip if the team doesn't work out because you get to sell Xantares for 6 figures. And that pretty much was how I was, like, framing it for potential owners. Once Xantares was out, that was like a huge fucking blow to the team's prospects of being picked up, certainly by any international esports organizations. And I think they found out that brutal reality. What was interesting was the twit longer that that Major put out didn't talk about Xantares, didn't call anyone out specifically. Was pretty emotional, actually, if you go read it, you know, just saying how he's really sad to have to call time on the project and where he is, and that, you know, for 2 years, because they worked together a long time. This was like a band of brothers, you know, that kind of stuff. And actually, interestingly enough, he dedicated everything. He was like, it's all been about hard style, which, as I said, having seen his like weathered, aging face, not unlike my own, I don't doubt that he did a lot of work and did put in a shift. And really held this team together and tried his hardest to get them onto a very good team. But this is what I am interested in. Major, obviously French, speaks French fluently. This is it, G2. This is the move. We can end the Shock's vanity project of him being an in-game leader and bringing a real in-game leader. And seriously, Major, you'll be able to dry your fucking eyes, first of all, with the money, and second of all, with the prospect. You're working with 2 of the best French players. Like, as an IGL, it's a dream. This, to me, is a move that, like, G2 have to go out and get this guy. Like, I'm 100% behind that. You move Amanek to fucking... you know, whatever role. People are saying in the chat, I'm an in-game leading. You're never in-game leading if you're on a team with Shocks. You're temporarily keeping that position warm. So he decides the team is bad and takes over again, as he's done repeatedly, time and time again. Like Happy before him, carrying on the cycle of mad narcissistic French players. But anyway, for me, I like this could actually do something with G2. I think you drop, probably it would be Jax. And you bring Major in, and let's see what that lineup can do with the real in-game leader. But anyway, what do you think of Major being on the free market?
Yeah, the tough one with this is like it is tough to see what options he has beyond this. Like you said, the French scene is the most obvious one because at least he has roots there. I even would agree, like worth a crack if you're G2, because at the moment I just find it quite implausible to believe that we can do what happened in 2016 where Shox was like the in-game leader and one of the best fraggers in the world. Like that's just going to be so rare that ever happens, and I don't really buy that it can happen. So personally, anything that gets Shox off the in-game leader role, I'm up for giving it a go. Like let's give it a try in that sense. In fact, you could even argue, since Space Soldiers was more of like I would just say like free form team, because I kind of felt like they let the fraggers do what they want to do. That might even be the right style for G2. So I could see that working somewhat. I will just say as well on the Xantares angle, that's one of those complaints where on one level, yeah, I can totally sympathize with the players where it's like, yeah, but if he just stays, we could have sold the team. But it's like, if one player is so valuable that if he leaves, no one gives a fuck about your team, I'm sorry, the rest of you weren't good enough. Like, you didn't have a big enough profile. You didn't do enough in the game because, like, there's plenty of other teams. You take one player out. I still find someone who's interested in that team. But the reality was people have no faith in your region. So that's just by the by anyway. But I can totally see where that team died out. Sadly, if you look at the time they spent together, fucking hell, you know what? As much as I was never a fan of them as a team, I don't know if any team's ever got paid as little and still accomplished the level that they actually did. So fair play to them. It's just a shame none of them ever got fucking paid.
Yeah, and you're right. That is a shame because there was definitely that lineup had potential. That lineup could have gone and repped one of these, brands that were coming into CS and done a great job. And instead, what they actually ended up doing career-wise was kind of struggling and limping along and having some half-decent showings at international tournaments, which were always a chore and a ball ache to get to. They were plagued with visa problems because of the amateurish setup they had over at Space Soldiers. And in the end, the 2 years that they committed to, they didn't get the best out of those 2 years. Literally just was like, it's like a Faustian pact without the payoff. So I feel for all of those players, especially because the ones that didn't have the international capabilities like Major or the star power and talent like Xantares, that was the pinnacle of your career. That was it now. And you're going to be back playing in like ESL Pro League Turkey. And it's sad. That Space Soldiers team was legit for a period of time. And just never capitalized on it for whatever reason. So sympathies, but I think Major's redemption arc is in France 100%. I think, like I say, G2, Carlos, I know he watches the podcast. Give that man a fucking phone call. Don't listen to what Shock says. Don't listen to what Kenny says. Put your fucking foot down. Bring a real in-game leader into your roster. Cut Jax. He's 26. Give him a nice fat paycheck just to make him go away. He had his time. Ignore what Malek says. Like, just do this move because there isn't a good in-game leader out there in the French scene right now that you can get. We've always had to wonder what if Major could have worked with the French players. Well, now we can answer that question definitively, and G2 needs it. G2 look pretty poor right now. If you not picking up a percentage of that big fat check at WESG didn't make you fucking maybe start ticking over, that you need to make some changes. But I don't know what it's going to take to motivate you. So, right. $100 question from Reykjavik on Steam. With the Swedish and French scenes being tatters of their former glory over the past 2-3 years, are there any other scenes in danger of also falling for the same trap of keeping old talent in top teams for too long and not allowing young stars to come through and learn the ropes? That's a good question. Do any immediately jump out to you?
I mean, the thing is, when he says the whole scene, that's a bit of a tougher one because, like, the most obvious one that comes to mind in terms of a team is Navi because they won't fucking they got electronic and that's it. They won't let fucking Edward go. Like, they won't try any of these other people in the CIS region. So, like, that's vaguely one because I do think the CIS region has to some degree just sat on all their fucking talent for quite a few years. They let electronic through because he was so absurdly good. Someone had to. Hobbit got a chance, and by the way, isn't even that young if you go and look at how old he is. He got a chance basically because he's fucking Kazakhstani and so is Adren. Aside from that, they haven't really given many opportunities to other people. Like, I always felt like when they brought Mir in, they never fucking built the team around him anyway. So I think CIS region hasn't done a great job. I think they've held under their veterans for way too long. Who else would qualify for this?
The Brazilians are a good shout here. Because, I mean, obviously we'll talk about it next episode, what went down at the Blast. We all know how bad that was. But there are younger players. And obviously,
they have a problem with the contract aspect, though,
yeah,
haven't they? That's
I was just going to bring that up.
I do feel like if we were 3 years ago, Richard, and the contract situation was how it was back then, I think Fallen would already have gone through a whole bunch of these people, mate. He would have never gone for Stewie 2K and Tarek. He'd have been trying out fucking the TRK guy from One or K Serato or any number of other people in some of these other teams that at one point in time looked like a hot prospect, you know. I think Fallen's cutthroat enough he would have brought these people in. But yeah, unfortunately, contract scenarios are bizarrely prohibitive in the Brazilian scene. Like, one of the things I find amazing is some of these teams aren't even paying the player much, aren't even in a position where the player's ever going to get anywhere close to the offer they're getting from MIBR, but MIBR can't afford them pretty much, or it's just not worth it for that player.
And like, I mean, look, there is other layers of complexity with that. Like, it's not just this mad contract thing. I mean, some of these players, they probably didn't think too far ahead about where they were actually going to be. You know, like, I don't think K Serato knew he was going to be like hotly contested and have Fallen say, like, do you want to be the next Cold Zero effectively? You never look that far ahead, especially if you're a young player. You don't know where your skill ceiling is. You don't know where your value is. But right now, there's definitely players, in particular on Furia, that I think, you know, look, for whatever reason, there's something not working out with MIBR, and maybe it's like I can only realistically in my mind give them one more event. If this was a completely new lineup where people hadn't played with each other, you know, maybe I'd give them longer. But this is like, you know, if the fucking Beatles fucking just decided to come back and fucking like, oh, let's make the band again, and every album they recorded was shit, you'd be like, yeah, the magic's just gone, hasn't it, for whatever reason. There's no excuse on a technical level why you shouldn't just be able to just start writing hits again, you know. But it's just like sometimes it just goes, it just eludes you. So I think we're rapidly hitting that realization where you are going to have to bring in some fresh blood. Let's not forget, the Brazil scene was stagnating before Cold Zero exploded onto the scene, and Fallen went and basically give him the opportunity of a lifetime, and man, did he fucking repay it. You know, it might be time to do that again. So I'd be inclined to say that Brazil could definitely maybe risk, if you like, pushing out some of the old guard and giving some of the younger chaps a bit more room. I mean, at this stage, it can't hurt if you're MIBR, but guess we'll wait and see. Maybe they'll bounce back next event and make me look stupid. And that's it. That's all we have from the questions. So just a reminder, of course, that we are sponsored by Rivalry.com. You can support the channel and all the content by going to rivalry.com/RLS. You know, you get $350 of VIP bonuses. Hope people were taking advantage of Thunderdome over the course of the Blast. For people who want to know more about that, you can put !Thunderdome in chat. But basically, what they also do at Rivalry, so you don't have to gamble if that ain't your thing. There's like a game of skill where you just enter, you make predictions, and if you get them all right, you win $1,000, and sometimes even more. The prizes have been higher, so you can just go over and check that out for next time they're doing that when there's a tournament going. Also, as well, if you go over to my Twitter account and look at my pinned tweet, there's a giveaway, a skin giveaway over there, which you can enter. We've had, I think, how many are we up to here? Yeah, we've had like 26,000 entrants so far. So really happy with how far that's gone out. So go and check it out. Again, completely free to enter. But there you have it. So we finally got this fucking episode wrapped up in 3 installments. Farewell, episode 71. All that remains to be done is to thank our patrons that make it possible. Our $100 patrons, Jerky's Minion, Detlef Insomniac, Regovic on Steam, Mikhail, Alex Ragnarsson, and of course our $50 patrons, Benakagi Assassin, Carv, Roosty, Colin Penny, Nostradamus, Sard Sawar, Madsen, TC Owens, Manuel Stockley, Marcus Kimpart, and Watchdoge. Thanks to everybody who tuned in. Hope you're enjoying the VOD on YouTube, and we will see you sometime next week.